WhatsApp.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
It is 7:30. A very good morning to you. This is OTB AM. We've got a packed 2.5 hours coming your way over the next little while, with a focus on the All-Ireland Hurling semi-finals, the final lines test, the Olympic Games, and of course the news last night that Lionel Messi will not be continuing with Barcelona under their current financial circumstances. It is a massive story that broke yesterday evening, and we will be getting stuck into this over the course of the next couple of hours. And we would, of course, as ever, love your reaction to it. Where is Lionel Messi going to end up? You can drop us a tweet at Off The Ball or comment on the YouTube stream if that's where you're getting us. Delighted to say as well, we'll have Dave McIntyre with us for the next little while. Dave, good morning to you.
Morning, Alan. How are you?
Yeah, good. This is one of these Friday mornings in the middle of the summer where you're like, there is a lot of sport and it's all bloody meaningful.
Yeah, it is. We're getting to the business end of an awful lot of sports stories, aren't we? Obviously, the GAA's got it to the All-Ireland semi-final stage. We've got the final test of a line series, which only comes around every 4 years, which is going to be something to enjoy tomorrow if the fare on offer is a little more entertaining than it was a week ago. Olympics getting into their final few days as well, and I thought we were getting to the very end of these huge transfer stories, but given the news that emerged from Barcelona last night, I thought it was very late in the day for something this huge to actually come out. I thought we were all of the understanding that this deal just would be signed or had already been signed. We just hadn't been told yet. But yeah, there's so much to try and get through, and you just need to try and make as much space in your schedule as you can over the next 2.5 days if you want to cram everything in.
I think Euro 2020 probably pulled the wool over our eyes on this Lionel Messi story a little bit. Maybe we should have been keeping up the speed in it a little bit better than we were, but even just kind of going back and reading a lot of what was written in, say, throughout early July, Dermot Corrigan in particular has been on top of this for a long, long time, and he was saying, even in his pieces when it looked like Messi was going to stay, that cool the jets a little bit, guys. This thing is not done. Just because he said that he's re-signed on a 50% salary reduction does not mean that this thing is done, because there are a whole other slew of things at play here to ensure that Lionel Messi is going to be in a bit of competition to actually get back into this Barcelona squad. So we shouldn't have been surprised, but I think because of the Euros and because of this busy summer, I think a lot of us were probably we were caught blind a little bit by this yesterday. So what's your gut feeling on how this whole thing plays out?
I'm not sure, really. I think as well we have to acknowledge that the Copa America was taking place as well, and it was possibly one of his maybe final 2 chances to eventually lift a trophy as an Argentina player and as the Argentina captain, which he obviously did go on and do, and finally tick that box. And maybe he didn't want himself an awful lot of speculation going on in the background when he was down in South America trying to get the job done there as well. It just goes to show how perilous a financial situation they're in. I know it's been laid bare over the last few months, but despite agreeing supposedly this 50% pay cut. Now, I know there was caveats to that in terms of ambassadorial and coaching roles potentially in the future, that they still are not able to get this over the line. So he's bent over backwards, obviously. The club have obviously done whatever they possibly can to try and get some sort of a deal onto the table. But as you say, and as Corrigan was saying, they still have to get that onto the books, and they still have to get the go-ahead from the authorities in La Liga and the tick those financial boxes, and they haven't been able to do it. So it's just a question of whether you believe the situation, whether Barcelona are trying to make a bit of a power play against the Liga in what's been a big week for the league, given the deal that they've signed with CVC. And I know Barcelona and Real Madrid signed a joint statement last night saying they weren't consulted on this at all. And you wonder, is there some sort of an influence from that in what's going on with the Messi situation? Do they think they can force La Liga's hand, given that you would imagine overall those in La Liga and the higher echelons of the organisation don't want to see the most high-profile player in the league leaving and heading for pastures new? And then you think about, well, if it is true, where does he go? This late stage, I mean, there's really only 2 clubs that can probably afford to take him on. It's Man City and PSG. If City have already spent 100 million on Grealish and expect to spend potentially up to another 150 on Harry Kane, where does Messi fit into that jigsaw? And I mean, one of the first things that struck me was, well, maybe Mbappe's headed to the Bernabeu, and then Messi will potentially be able to go to PSG and link up with his old pal Neymar. I mean, look, we're just throwing stuff at the wall here and hoping some of it sticks in terms of what may or not be true, but it's a fascinating discussion. There's so many strands to it. You can probably give the whole morning over to where exactly will Leo Messi be in a month's time.
Well, that's the thing. The lads were speaking to Graham Hunter when the news broke last night, but we're going to go back to Graham after 9 o'clock this morning because there is so much more to get into him than the surface level of the story that they covered last night in those time constraints. And like you mentioned, even the possibility of Real Madrid perhaps signing Kylian Mbappe there. Like, if you go through the writing on this subject over the past few months on a kind of zoomed out La Liga level, Real Madrid are also screwed. Like, I mean, Barcelona are the most screwed, and the figures that have come out of Barcelona are extraordinary. Like, just to put it into context, so 2 seasons ago, Barcelona had the largest salary cap in La Liga at €671 million. Last year, it was almost halved to €347 million. This season, it's somewhere in the region of €160 million. So 671 million down to €160 million in the space of 2 seasons is how extraordinary their mismanagement of finances has been for a multitude of reasons. Real Madrid aren't that bad, but they have also had a similar level of contraction in the ability that they were able, the ability of financial spending that they have at their disposal. So it's going to be really interesting to hear from Graham on that as to what Real Madrid and the league as a whole can do. And your point is a fascinating one, and possibly the key one, about what can La Liga do now, or what do La Liga want to do now for the sake of their own product. So they've seen Ronaldo leave over the last few years, they've seen Neymar leave over the last few years, and still CVC were interested in coming in and buying a massive €3 billion 10% stake in the league. But Lionel Messi is obviously a much bigger deal than both of them. Do CVC start to question the money they're pouring into this league if the biggest star leaves? Because in those circumstances, that would probably make Javier Tebas probably do a double take. But the problem there is that he's got a few scores to settle after the whole Super League thing, and Barcelona are not in the good books. Barcelona probably still harbour ambition of a Super League at some point down the line. So there are so many different political threads going on here, and it's really hard to tell who's going to blink first.
Yeah, it is. And the time for said blinking is scarce because the new season is almost upon us. Again, even with the CVC deal, announcing it this close to a new La Liga season took me by surprise as well. Now, it shouldn't surprise the CVC are dipping their toe into these sort of waters because they have spent so much of the last 2 years buying up sports rights and shares in these huge sporting organisations across a multitude of codes. But it's well past the point where the best players wanted to and were headed for Spain. It is now a situation where we saw how strong the Premier League performed in Europe last season, and we had an all-English final for the second time in 3 seasons. Barcelona, Real Madrid, very much off the pace, albeit Atletico and Sevilla were just about clinging on in some situations. But it is not the league it once was. You've outlined Barcelona's financial mismanagement in the last decade, and unlike Real Madrid, who have managed to offload the likes of Rafael Varane and Sergio Ramos from their wage bill, Barcelona haven't really done the same. I know they cut it significantly, as you outlined the figures there, but they still have guys on huge money there that are not pulling their weight. Guys like Griezmann, for example, a move that simply has not worked. And you would think that if they really are going to get back at an even keel, losing a 34-year-old Leo Messi maybe wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Yeah, no, I financially, it is the play that makes sense. On a footballing level, it obviously doesn't make sense at the moment, considering he's still absolutely amazing, but it has gone way beyond what's a footballing decision at this point. And you sort of feel for someone like Ronald Koeman at this point, because this has gone so far over his head that he almost feels, I'd imagine, like a man who just is not in control of his team at the moment. Yeah.
So,
well, Ronald Koeman would have been fully aware. He's not stupid. He would have known exactly what he was getting himself into when he took that job. I'm surprised he's lasted as long as he has in the job, and he probably is. I'd say in his own heart of hearts, he didn't expect to still have this gig heading into a new season, but he would have known it was essentially a basket case that he was taking over when he got that job. So I would doubt anything surprises him at the moment. But one thing we haven't mentioned, like we very briefly mentioned PSG and Manchester City, but wouldn't it be fascinating? We've watched his entire career, although maybe you're too young really to remember Leo Messi in his very early days, going back 17 or 18 years when he made his debut. You would have been 6-7 years of age.
I went to Barcelona and I got a very fake Lionel Messi jersey with number what was his initial number before he changed, or whatever it was. So I was there from the start, Dave.
Okay, but wouldn't you love to see how you would perform in the Premier League and what sort of a system he would fit into. Would the whole team have to revolve around him? Would he be able to play the 38 games and the League Cup and a Champions League and everything that goes with that as well, where he's minded a little bit more in Spain? Would he continue to play for Argentina? Would he learn the language? Would he settle in at his age, having spent so long in Barcelona, which has been his home since he was about 7 or 8 years of age? That would be fascinating to see. Could he do it in that old adage, a wet, windy night? Maybe not at the Bet365 stadium, but some other
in Brentford
Premier League club.
That'll be the key. And as I say, we're going to be chatting to Graham a little bit later on. I'm just fascinated about the slight irony that will exist if he does go to Paris Saint-Germain or Manchester City, because these La Liga rules have been called loosely financial fair play. I think financial fair play is more of a state of mind than any sort of concrete idea at the moment, and it's been imposed so harshly in La Liga, whereas in the Premier League and Ligue 1 they just don't exist at the moment. And even the European-wide financial fair play has been relaxed so much during the pandemic that we've seen extraordinary spending from Manchester City, as we've seen with the Jack Grealish signing yesterday, and from Paris Saint-Germain. So it would be kind of a cruel irony on La Liga fans to see Lionel Messi leave and almost just add to the wage bill in a huge manner at either of those two clubs. So as I say, we'll come back to this in depth after 9 o'clock. It is 7:41 on this Friday morning. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Will O'Callaghan, good morning.
Morning, Dave. Morning, Owen. How are you getting on?
Yeah, good. What's happening this morning?
Well, Natalia Coyle has got a pretty action-packed day at the Olympics in the modern pentathlon. Having placed third in the fencing yesterday, the Meath woman has picked up 283 points in the swim, which she completed in just over 2 hours this morning. Coyle is back out for the bonus round of the fencing in about 15 minutes' time. That's before the show jumping just after 9, and then she'll be in the combined running and shooting at 11 a.m. We'll know after those 3 events particularly whether Coyle has a chance of taking home a medal. Her third Olympics, having previously placed twice in the top 10. Donegal's Brendan Boyce, also a veteran of the Games, has secured his best ever finish in the 50k walk. He finished up in 10th place in a time of 3 hours and 53 minutes in the event, which won't be part of the Games in 2024 in Paris. Leavel's Alex Wright had a season's best in finishing 29th overall. Stephanie Meadow is now 4 shots outside the medal positions after 3 rounds of the women's golf. The Antrim native is signed for a round of 68 today to move to 7 under par. Leona Maguire will need a big final round tomorrow if she's to compete for a medal, though. She's 5 under after 3 days. The world number 1, Nelly Korda, has dominated from start to finish here. She leads by 3 strokes at 15 under par in the gold medal position. Ireland have been drawn in 9th place to jump in the team show jumping qualifier. The top 10 of 19 entries will qualify for tomorrow's final. There won't be any Keane O'Connor after his horse suffered a nosebleed in the individual competition a couple of days ago. Elsewhere at the Olympics, Emily Kay and Shannon McCurley, they'll be in action in the women's Madison in the Velodrome, and they're due out just after 9 o'clock Irish time. Shamrock Rovers and Dundalk both registering positive results in the Conference League third round qualifiers last night, lads. League of Ireland champions Rovers grabbed a late winner in beating Albania's Teuta 1-0 at Tallaght Stadium in their first leg. It was a 17-year-old coming off the bench in Idoma Imaku who came off the bench to net in the 91st minute of the game, which gives Rovers something to hold going into that second leg in Albania next week. Patrick McElhenney scored one of the best goals we've seen from an Irish team in Europe ever last night. His deft chip, the second goal, is the one that gets all the headlines. Good header for the first goal too, as they drew 2-2 away from home against Vitesse Arnhem. Vinnie Perth, their manager, spoke about the ongoing situation about broadcasters not showing the games terrestrially in Ireland, and he has said that that's far less important than actually upgrading stadiums in the League of Ireland to try and attract more supporters in, and also to have a better playing surface for players. Celtic meanwhile had their first win of the season. They beat Czech side FC Jablonec 4-2 in the first leg of their Europa League third round qualifying tie. Joe Hart, the former England goalkeeper, getting his first start for the Hoops there. On the pitch tonight, it's 5th against 6th in the SSE Electricity League Premier Division. Derry City will host Drogheda at 7:45. A win for the visitors there would see them climb into the European places. The new championship season also kicks off tonight. A clash between two teams who will have hopes of promotion. West Brom are eyeing up an immediate return to the Premier League ahead of their trip to Scott Parker's Bournemouth. Barcelona President Joan Laporta, linked to the story that you guys have been talking about so far, will host a press conference at 10 a.m. Irish time to discuss course, Leo Messi's expected departure from the club. The six-time World Player of the Year looks set to leave the Spanish Giants after a trophy-laden 2 decades. Barcelona are unable to register a contract they've agreed with the player due to La Liga's salary cap. Jack Grealish last night becoming the Premier League's most expensive player. Manchester City paying £100 million, which is his release clause, to sign the England midfielder from Aston Villa. Grealish has put pen to paper on a 6-year contract with the reigning Premier League champions. And Limerick boss John Kiely has made 2 changes for tomorrow evening's All-Ireland Hurling semi-final against Waterford. They were switches they made against Tipperary in the Munster final. Dan Morrissey's been given the nod to start at full back, while Aaron Gillan is restored to the attack. Graham Mulcahy and Richie England will drop to the bench for the Munster champions.
Dave, you're limbering up for this one. You're calling it for Sky this weekend.
Yeah, I am. I can't wait. Of the 2 semi-finals, this probably would have been the one I would have been hoping to get. But I do think there's a potential classic at Cork Kilkenny as well. Obviously, both of them are on Sky tomorrow and Sunday. I did the Waterford-Galway game, and it took me about 24 hours to get my breath back. It was an absolutely phenomenal game. And I also did the semi-final against Kilkenny last season and the final against Limerick. So I've seen an awful lot of Waterford over the last few months. And I just think tomorrow could be another game that will go right down to the wire. We'll get into it, the thick of it, with Ciaran Carey later in the show about, potential fatigue and tiredness for Waterford. But as solid as Limerick have been, and as the clear favourites that they are, I think Waterford have been the story of the championship. The way they've played, the pace and the tenacity and the dynamism they've played with. Can they do it 4 weeks in a row, though? It's just such a huge ask, even for a bunch of guys who are as fit and as athletic as they are, against probably the fittest and most athletic and most powerful and explosive team we've ever seen in the history of the game.
Yeah, and therein lies the problem for them. We will have Ciaran Carey, as Dave mentioned, in just a while. We'll also have our quick picks a little bit later on. But, I mean, Dave, you were also marvelling in the greatness of McElhenney last night. But you were complimenting both goals. I mean, the chip is the one that caught my eye, but you were saying the header's not getting enough credit.
Yeah, the header won't get any credit because the deftness of touch for the second goal was just Ronaldinho-esque. I mean, if you haven't seen it, I'm speaking to our listeners here, obviously, go and have a look at it on YouTube this morning. There's a really good 10-minute highlights reel about that game with Vitesse last night. So you get a real flavour of how the game went. It was end-to-end stuff, judging by the highlights. But the header that he scored was just one of these centre-half type, powerful back post headers where he hung in the air. He got this incredible leap, and it just encapsulated what McElhenney has, that he can do all the really skillful, incredibly soft, delicate, delicious, sumptuous touches that he's able to produce here and there, but he still has the athleticism and the physique to score the sort of a header that he did last night to get them right back into it. But if you're a Dundalk fan, you're watching that with mixed emotions, because part of you's thinking, isn't that incredible what he's done here tonight? And he's given us a great chance of reaping the group stages of the Europa Conference, but he's heading out the door soon, and he's headed up the road to Derry City. And I mean, will they ever have a more skillful and a more uplifting player than Patrick McElhenney? And it still amazes me that he hasn't had a chance to perform at a high level in England, because maybe it's down to consistency, but God, he's one of the most skillful players we've ever seen play in the League of Ireland, and at least we will still get to see him strutting himself at the Brandywell. But Dundalk fans will be dreading the day that they have to say goodbye to him on the evidence of what he produced last night, because he had a fabulous game, and in fact he could have had a hat-trick, because he sent a rocket in from about 35 yards that grazed the woodwork. Had that gone in, it would have been a better goal than the 2 he actually did score.
Yeah, Will, I'm not sure, has there been a better week in Europe for Irish football, given the volume of clubs involved?
Yeah, look, it's right up there. I mean, from Bohemians' point of view, they've created a bit of history by becoming the first League of Ireland club to win 4 consecutive games in Europe. They've won 3 games in a row at the Aviva Stadium. And look, it's a difficult task for them going away from home to take on PAOK next week. But still, to go there with something to hold on to after that 2-1 victory was a remarkable result, which they picked up with the 2 Coots goals during the week. Like, Dundalk looked really at home, and they've got plenty of experience in that squad of playing in European football, so they weren't daunted by the task in Holland last night against Vitesse Arnhem. But I watched that game and I thought Dundalk were good throughout the fixture. As Dave mentioned, McElhenney was unlucky not to get a third goal. Imagine if they'd been 3-2 up going into Tallaght Stadium for next week. But away goals don't matter this time round for qualifying, but Dundalk are still in a very strong position. They'll feel that they've got every chance now of finishing the job next week. And for Shamrock Rovers, it was so crucial for them to win, because I flicked that game on with about 20 minutes to go, and it reminded me of the World Cup qualifier between Israel and the Republic of Ireland, where everything possible was done by their Albanian opponents to slow the ball down. You had the goalkeeper going down, grabbing his ribs at one stage. They were taking their time with throw-ins and kick-outs, doing everything possible just to get past the 90 minutes and to have a 0-0 draw and to go back and try and win that fixture next Thursday. But Shamrock Rovers crucially got a winner just before the end of the game in injury time. You know, what a story with a teenager coming on to score the winner too. As a result, we've just had a magnificent week for the League of Ireland. And understandably, there's going to be a lot of focus on the managers. Both Keith Long and also Stephen Bradley hit out this week at the fact that, broadcasters have not taken up the option to put these on terrestrial TV, particularly as it emerged in Aidan Fitzmaurice's article that Bohemians were actually willing to give away the rights for free to show their game, and that they would happily pass by the money that they're making for the streaming just to have the game on TV. I think the broadcasters have probably missed a trick. But then again, as Dave will probably know on this, the qualifier rounds for the Europa League and now for the new Conference League are effectively the Wild West, really. And it's only really formulated into an agreement when we get to the group stages. So maybe, the fact that the Olympics are on meant that it was going to be very difficult for RTE to broadcast them. But you couldn't have had a better week of results for League of Ireland clubs, albeit I think I'm about 20 quid out of pocket from watching the games this week.
Well, that's for sure. I think that there was maybe kind of like a sneeriness towards the Conference League because of the prism through which we viewed it was the Premier League. Whereas I think what we actually forgot when this thing was, when the inception of this thing came along, was that actually when it comes to the Irish clubs, this will have huge benefits. Obviously the television thing maybe gets ironed out next season and it becomes a truly positive thing. But even just for Irish clubs on the continent, having this extra competition certainly can't hurt, and it's doing them a great service over the course of the last few days. Will O'Callaghan, great stuff. We'll chat to you later on.
Cheers, lads.
All right, at 7:51 on this Friday morning, let's tell you what's coming up on OTB AM over the course of the next couple of hours. We're going to have Alan Quinlan with us in just a moment to begin our build-up to the third and final test of the British and Irish Lions Tour in South Africa. The sports page is coming your way at 8:10, and then Ciaran Carey is going to be with us at 8:20 to look ahead in particular to Limerick against Waterford this weekend. Our GAA Quick Picks will cover both games, and then Rob Kearney will be with us at 10:09 to give us his take on the Lions Tour so far. As I mentioned then, Graham Hunter will be back with us at 9:10. To talk about Lionel Messi and to try and give us a sense of what Laporta might actually talk about at 10 o'clock this morning. And then Brian O'Driscoll closing things out at 9:30 this morning. So plenty of Lions coming your way between now and the end of the show. Dave, has this tour excited you? Is it something that you've kind of got engrossed in on an intriguing level rather than a wow, this is very spark-filled rugby level?
I would say on a dutiful level, in that I'm a rugby commentator and it's my job to keep abreast of all the major events in this sport, which I absolutely love watching and adore commentating on. But there have been times over the last couple of weeks where there's been a small part of me who's been thankful that I haven't been commentating on, particularly that second test. First test was absorbing, really intriguing, a few line breaks here and there, but it was just the manner of this. So it was the game of two halves, and it was the first test that gave us an insight into where the Springboks really were and how much room for improvement they had, and Warren Gatland trying to win that first test and put them in a position where they could really have a go at the series. But I don't think anyone, even the most devoted rugby fan, will look back on the second test with any fondness, and at any stage where they've been watching it thinking, yeah, this is what I sat down to watch this afternoon. I mean, I think the first half finished at 6:15, having kicked off at 5 o'clock. And in nobody's world is that an optimum product that anyone wants to sit down, even those who might just tune in for test match rugby during the Six Nations or the autumn or the World Cup or Alliance Series, and compare that to someone that would watch the Pro 14 or the Premiership week in, week out. You can only hope that tomorrow's game is a step up on that. I think the team that Warren Gatland picked points slightly towards maybe a broadening of the Lions' horizons. I don't think we'll expect anything different from South Africa, and they will have just looked back on the second test and thought, if we can just replicate what we did, particularly in that second half a week ago, we will win this test series. No fans hasn't helped. I think the cloud of COVID, not just in South Africa, but across the world, has definitely hindered people's enjoyment of it. And the style of rugby, as we said, hasn't helped either. But I've watched it all, and there's been parts of it that I have enjoyed. But in 25 years' time, I'm not sure we're going to be looking back on the documentary. I don't even think they're making one this time around, are they? But look back with the fondness they did in 97, or even just a few weeks ago, I watched all of the documentaries just to prime myself for this tour. And I did it in chronological order, going all the way back up to the tour of New Zealand in 2017. And I was really ready to get stuck into it. I'm not sure in 25 years' time, in the build-up to a Lions tour, we're going to be sitting down and watching the 2021 documentary.
That's a lot of screen time, Dave. Those documentaries are like 3 hours long.
Well, I don't think I watched any of them in one go. I took it in bite-sized chunks, but you do forget an awful lot of the detail of these tours.
Yeah.
Some of them more memorable than others, but even watching the 2009 tour, which was led by Paul O'Connell, was a fascinating watch.
Unbelievable.
Just unbelievable.
Yeah, I was watching.
And
Watch that. We did a classic game club a couple of weeks ago with Brian O'Driscoll, and kind of watched that in the build up to it. That's a brilliant documentary. The series itself, obviously, unbelievable. We're going to have Rob Kearney with us, by the way, as well, and we might touch on a bit of 2009 with him, considering he was so amazing in that second test. But I'm delighted to say at 7:55 we do have Alan Quinlan with us. Alan, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are you?
Yeah, good. It felt this time last week we were saying, there might be a little bit of a vulnerability with the Springboks when it comes to maybe the breakdown, and dare we say it, maybe physically the Lions might have the edge in a few different positions. That turned on its head in the space of last weekend, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I think everyone was pretty surprised by how dominant the Springboks were in the second half last week. I thought the Lions, even though it's not pretty on the eye and nobody can justify and say that I'm wrong or anybody else is wrong for saying this has been poor rugby on the eye. It's been really a tough watch. It's been very intense and physical and all that stuff. And neither side are being too expansive. They're trying to do the simple things well and put pressure on each other. And that first half last week, it was all going according to plan for the Lions. I don't think Warren Gatland would have minded what anybody says about the type of game that was played over the first two tests if they'd won that at the end. And you think back to Robbie Henshaw, he scores that try before half time, they're in the driving seat. And I was really surprised that the way that South Africa played in that second half, and they were just utterly dominant, given we were talking about fatigue in the second half of the first test, and maybe they looked tired and that they were shot, and that lack of game practice, COVID, all that kind of stuff would have a real negative effect on them. So I was surprised, and it was incredibly intense, but poor rugby to watch. And you have to say probably the momentum and that momentum is with the South Africans now for this third test.
Quinny, on that, the fatigue that we saw from South Africa in the second part of that first test, myself and Eoin were discussing the fact that the first half finished at 6:15 last week, an hour and 15 minutes after it kicked off. And obviously that suited the Springboks completely down to the ground, because the ball spent so much time off the field. There was so much time spent with the referee and his officials and the TMO discussing things, so much time getting ready for set pieces and treatment of injuries. Now, an awful lot of that is beyond the Lions' control, but what can they do? What can you do as a team and as an individual to try and get that quick tempo back, to try and cut down the amount of stoppages and to keep the ball on the field as much as possible? Is there anything the Lions can bring to the game that will see them put the Lions or the Springboks into that uncomfortable position where their fitness and their mental fitness is going to be tested again as it was the first day?
Just it's such a relevant point, Dave, that and South Africa do this so well. They control the tempo of games. Their set piece is so good. Their pressure game, defensively, they put you under so much pressure. So I think the Lions have been afraid to play against them. They've been trying to match like with like, kicking game, pressure, all that kind of stuff. And look, it worked in that first test because they were so much better when they came out after half time. They were brave, kicking to the corner. Luke Cowan-Dickey scores the try. They're forcing the mistakes. South Africa didn't have an answer. They're not a good team to chase a game, South Africa, if they're behind. When they're in front, they can control all those things. And they look for those big moments. Scrum, breakdown, turnover, line-out steal. And that's what we saw last week in the second test. So people have asked me all week, and what can the Lions do? And they've got to identify where there is some space and be patient with the ball. They are kicking it away. The first attack last week, Figure's taken out in the air. close to his own 10-yard line by McIntyre. They kicked the penalty downfield, brilliant touch line, penalty down on the Springboks 22, and they have a line out. They win the line out at the front, play 2 phases in field, and then they play another 2 phases off that ruck, with Maka Vunipola and Courtney Laws carrying, and then they pass the ball 20 yards back to Dan Bigger to put an up and under in the air. Billy LaRue knocks it on, they get a scrum, they kick a penalty from that. And I just know myself for being out in the field, that's the kind of plan they had. Pressure, 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 do all this stuff that the South Africans do so well, and we'll win the game. We'll get penalties and we'll force mistakes. And it backfired on them because, and it's a shame because I think there's a lot more talent in that Lions team and there's a lot more variety that they should bring. I really thought they were hiding, keeping something on the wraps before the test series started in the warm-up games, and I expected to see something different. So I think we didn't. Is it too late? It's probably not too late, but I just think we'll see a lot of the same again on Saturday. And you're in very risky territory, Dave, if you're taking on the South Africans at that power game and that pressure game. And I don't think the Lions can win on Saturday if they do that. I still think it's going to be very tight, and they will look back and focus on what they did really well in the first test. But to answer the question, I think you've got to be patient with the ball. You've got to be accurate and get some width in your game. And that's not just throwing the ball around willy-nilly. It's about putting it through the hands, resourcing the breakdowns, making some good carries, and maybe going for width again. You've got to engage their wingers to come up, because kicking directly off first phase into the backfield, McIntyre and Colby drop back there with Billy LaRue, and they're very, very dangerous if you kick loosely to them. Kicking up in the air is a 50-50 call, and they lost all those 50-50s last week. So I would just, to have any sort of control and tempo in your own game, you've got to do the basics really well, and then just get a bit of width in your game. Can the Lions do that? Yeah, they're capable of it. I think Bundy Aki will be a big addition to him. 6 changes in the team. They've picked Ken Owens for his scrummaging. Cowan Dickey's probably a more elusive player around the field. So there's a few selections there that you think it's going to be the same thing again. Liam Williams comes in, Josh Adams for that high ball. But they're in risky territory. I just love to see him be a bit more expansive and be brave with the ball.
Will Gatland not know that he will be open to a huge degree of criticism if they do the same thing again and they lose again?
Yeah, I presume he will, but is it too late to change on? I think the problem for me here was 3 weeks out from the first test. I think he should have been picking his Lions team. Hindsight's a great thing. If he won last week, everyone would say it was a master plan. And, Warren Gatland, in fairness to him, he's very shrewd. His back is to the wall now, and I think his players will come out fighting. But I thought that the lack of cohesion in the selections and the uncertainty about who would start that first test was going on for a long time. Normally on these Lions tours, you've 10, 12 guys nailed on, and there's only 2 or 3 places up for grabs. That hasn't been the case this time, and it's a different kind of mentalities to work off. So he was unsure himself, and that probably hasn't helped. I do think that I was looking for a plan B, and we didn't really see a plan B. Like I say, you set your stall out when you're in a good attacking position and you pass the ball 20 yards back to your fly half to kick it up in the air. People will argue and say they got 3 points out of it, but why not try and get the multi-phase? The situation, if you're talking about fatigue in an opposition, you have to get the multi-phase. 10, 15, 20 phases. We haven't seen that situation. Now people will argue, well, South Africa don't allow you to get to that because they'll come up with a big impact tackle, force a turnover at the breakdown and smash you. But if you're really accurate and if that was part of the plan going in and it was resourced and and practiced, I think it'd be great to have that in the locker and in your game plan, that you could do that. But of course he'll come in for criticism. But I think the Lions will come out fighting this week. Will they lose all those 50-50s in the air? I don't think so. Will they be pushed back in the scrum? I don't think so. Sometimes these things just spiral out of control when you're on the field. And South Africa got so much energy from some of those big plays last week that it just got worse and worse in the second half. And the Lions have to show real leadership. And I think there's been a lack of leadership throughout the team. It's been niggly, and they've tried to get into South Africans' faces when there's been a few scuffles and stand up to them. But I just don't think they've been shrewd the way they've played.
Why has there been a lack of leadership then? Like Alan Wynne-Jones coming back in, should that not have given them this massive leadership boost, and they would have been on the right track?
He's a leader, but I think you've got to lead on. Leadership is being vocal around leadership. There's more to it than just being vocal. Where's Tom Curry been in this tour? I think I was really, really looking forward to him. I'm a massive fan of his. He hasn't dominated either of those first two tests. Dan Biggar hasn't really grasped hold of the game. I'm a fan of his as well. He's so competitive. The changes at scrum half, Conor Murray is gone now again. Ali Price is in. What are they doing? What's he doing there? The changes in centre, Duhan van der Merwe. Leadership is about more than just being vocal. It's about grasping hold of the game, coming up with big plays. And there just hasn't been enough of that. Toje last week was quiet. He was really good in the first test. So I think when you look at this game, if the Lions are going to win this on, I look at moments like big turnovers, being brave in attack, getting over the gain line, making a decision out on the run that you're going to attack your opposition, all that kind of stuff. So, of course, there's lots of kind of guys who'd be vocal, and they've a lot of international caps and they've a lot of experience. But you've got to make big decisions out in the field and correct decisions and come up with big plays defensively and from an attacking point of view. And I just think they've looked a little bit disjointed, and that's a concern. Where you see the South Africans, the way they're creating the energy from the turnovers, from the tackles, they just look a way more cohesive unit. And that's crazy to say. Well, it's not crazy to say, because these guys won a World Cup and they've created their own leadership group and fantastic players. But they hadn't played for nearly 2 years. One match, then they have COVID cases. Most of them played for the South Africa game. So they're very undercooked, the South Africans, where going into this match on Saturday, this Lions group have played 8 games. And we're still talking about cohesion and looking a bit disjointed, inaccuracy in passes, all those warm-up games. I worked for all of them and I analysed all of them. And one of the common themes was the catch pass, the knock-ons, the turnovers, the sloppiness. And I think they haven't sorted those issues out. But, sometimes in games like this, when your back is to the wall, there's still a incredibly strong side. The emotional side of this will be very, very significant. And can they, bring a ferocity, but bring a little bit of expansive, exciting rugby? It'd be a shame if we're talking Saturday evening and saying, look, they've been 3 terrible test matches, because the first 2 have been terrible, and that's just a reality. But look, if Warren Gatland wins it, similar to the first test, he won't care. The same for Jacques Nienaber and Rassie Erasmus. If they squeeze the Lions and win by 3 points on Saturday, they won't care. But I just think it's a shame. It's something we've been looking forward to for a long, long time. And to have 2 test matches like we've had so far, it's been disappointing.
Is there any reason, Quinny, for you to believe that tomorrow will be different? Like, you would, on the face of it, 4 changes out of 7 on your back line would perhaps suggest a complete about-face in terms of game strategy and how you're going to approach the game. But you could argue that each of the 4 have just been brought in to do what the guys who started last week did, just do it better, because we've talked in detail about how Lions failed under the high ball, and as good as Liam Williams is with the ball in his hand, he's been brought in to take those high balls a bit better than Stuart Hogg managed, for example. But yet the one member of that back line that you would have imagined would be most likely to lose his place is Duhan van der Merwe. How has he managed to stay in the team when they've been chopping and changing to the extent they have been?
Yeah, it's just his size and physicality, and I think Warren has probably always in the history of knowing him and being involved with Ireland when he was there to start. He was always a fan of the physical player, the bigger player, and that's why Van der Merwe has stayed there.
And doesn't that just sum everything up, though, Quinny?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and Shane Horgan said that to me at the start of this tour, because I thought Van der Merwe would start, and he thought he was susceptible under the high ball, and when he turns, he's very good with the ball in hand. But yeah, you pick Liam Williams. I think Liam Williams is a fullback. He was my fullback before the first test, and I think he's a wonderful player. He's brilliant in the air. For all Stuart Hogg's strengths in attack, I think that there's still issues there around the high ball. Look, don't get me wrong. This is the very, very top end of competitiveness with the kicking game. Nobody kicks better than the South Africans. It's just part of their DNA. It's part of their game plan. It was so successful from at the World Cup, and I just making those changes in the back line. Is it going to change the way they play? No, it's not. He's just hoping that they're going to do the simple things better than they did last week, and I'm just concerned. One part of me thinks that the Lions are going to be ferocious and they're going to be a lot better with what they do this week. Another part of me thinks it's a shame that we're not going to see them attack, that they're going to buy into the narrative. And it's not easy against the South Africans, don't get me wrong. But I think back to that first test in 2016 when Ireland went to Cape Town. Different circumstances, a lot of the same players, South Africans, they were only starting out their Springbok kind of careers, but Ireland played just with brilliant tempo that day and pace, and they were disjointed, the South Africans. If you can get pace and tempo in your game, quick breakdown, easier said than done. But I just thought that this is a Lions team. This isn't a scratch international side. These are the best players in the British and Irish Isles, and I think they needed to be braver on this tour. But I still have a sneaking feeling that they could win this game on Saturday. As crazy as it may seem.
It seems to be what a lot of people are thinking, Alan, without having a whole pile of evidence to support it. They're thinking that the Lions may pull something out of the bag. Listen, enjoy the game tomorrow, Alan, and looking forward to your analysis on Monday.
Cheers. Thanks, lads.
Alan Quinlan there with us here on OTB AM, and we have brought you every Lions match today live and off the ball, and it all comes to a head this Saturday at 5 o'clock. You can hear the crucial third and final series deciding test live on Newstalk. Our coverage will be brought to you in association with Vodafone, lead partner of the British and Irish Lions. Now, we've still got a packed show to come on Friday's OTB AM. We'll be talking Messi with Graham Hunter after 9 o'clock. Rob Kearney will join us as well to give us his take on tomorrow's test, and we're back after these talking hurling with Ciaran Carey.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie. Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You're welcome back. Let's take you through some of the sports pages this morning, and we will start as ever with otbsports.com, which you can go and check out on the OTB Sports app as well. Plenty of reaction to last night's show up there at the moment. You can get all the latest on the Olympics on otbsports.com as well, and there's plenty build up to the weekend. So you can get the hurling. Gaelic gets starting berth as Limerick show their hand for semi-final. That's our main story. More hurling preview. Can Cork topple the Cats? That was from last night's show. Brilliant hurling preview actually, with Taggy Fogarty and Noel Connors on that one. And Vinnie Pert says it's not about TV, it's about facilities. Meanwhile, mighty Limerick meet fearless Waterford, and Grealish says he'll always be a Villa fan after sealing €117 million Manchester City move. To bring you around some of the newspapers then, the Irish Independent goes with a picture there of Patrick McElhenney celebrating after his stunning goal last night. The main story though is that Messi is set to leave Barca as a free agent, with Paris Saint-Germain poised. That Grealish story is there as well, as is the team news for the Limerick team ahead of tomorrow's All-Ireland semi-final. The Irish Times leads with Kelly Harrington. Harrington continues amazing journey, writes Johnny Waterson. Dubliner edges tactical semi-final to become just the second Irish woman to reach a final. The Herald then goes with Messi heading out the door. Barcelona legend announces his departure as a free agent from the Nou Camp. And we've also got plenty on the League of Ireland sides in action last night. One thing, Dave, that I'm keen to get your take on here, and on the back of the Herald, it's Ciaran Whelan, his column, Kingdom look to be top choice to lift Sam. He's done his power rankings basically inside in the Herald and the Independent. And spoiler alert, it is Tyrone at 4, Mayo at 3, Dublin at 2 and Kerry at 1. This is a flagrant incident of Dublin Yeraism, is it not?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's just the reality, to be honest. It's the Yeraism is at its highest when we've got people like you and others of your kingdom ilk telling us that Dublin should still be favourites for the All-Ireland this year, despite what the bookmakers up and down the country are telling us, despite what we've seen with our own eyes, despite the very obvious strides forward that Kerry have been taking over the last 12 months or so, or even going back to that replay defeat to Dublin in 2019. So I know you would like to put that sort of a slant on things, but I think Ciaran Whelan is saying what everyone in and outside of Dublin, bar the Kingdom, is feeling right now. Could change very quickly. You know, a big Tyrone performance in a semi-final that maybe Kerry struggled to get through, Dublin blitzing Mayo in a semi-final, everything will change. But on all known 2021 championship evidence, that headline there from Ciaran Whelan of the Herald, I think is pretty much on the money.
Do you know what, Dave? I fully agree with you, and you're not going to get any sideshow from me this morning. One other newspaper ringing this morning, the Irish Examiner, loving it. Harrington smiles all the way to the Olympic final. But I want to mention this. Derek McGrath's column this morning, very interesting, building up to Waterford against Limerick. The one team John Kiley didn't want is Waterford. Ciaran Carey, what do you make of that?
I'd say it could be a small bit of mind games involved there. I suppose in the past we've been able to deal with him pretty okay, but I suppose he has a point so far as if you look at both teams and if you take the last two games that they've both played, I suppose Waterford has been the most consistent in their last two games from start to finish, whereas Limerick, did enough to get over Cork, were troubled against Tipperary in the first half and obliterated and just blew Tipperary away in the second half. And I suppose if I was a Waterford player myself personally, you would obviously, look at last year's All-Ireland final, and I think as a squad and as management team, they probably didn't do themselves justice on that particular day. So they have a perfect opportunity this Saturday to put the record straight around that.
It does seem that the gap between them is maybe smaller than the 11-point margin. But at the same time, Ciaran, it does seem that if one team in the country right now can make a final result bigger than the actual gap between the teams, it is Limerick. They are the most lethal team. They can go through these hot periods of form, and even if it feels like you don't deserve a hammering against them, they'll still give you a hammering occasionally.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I suppose the game against Tipperary, if you like, finding themselves in the position that they did, that was new territory for them, and in my own opinion that was their first major exam. And I wasn't that surprised, but I was slightly surprised that they did it as quick as they did and as the fashion that they did. And I suppose looking at Saturday, the big one for me Saturday is the physicality of it still. You rightly pointed out the gap seems to be kind of tightened with a lot of the counties, but the physicality is still a big one for me with Limerick and Waterford. And if you had to pick one team that that you'd be confident that probably would match Limerick, you're probably talking Galway. So the physicality of it, I think, could be a big factor in it this Saturday.
What do you think is motivating Limerick most at the moment, Ciaran? Do you think that there's anything maybe deeper there about this idea of them becoming one of the greatest teams of all time, or is that nowhere in their head?
No, in fairness, they're keeping nice and cool. I don't think that is even mentioned. But I suppose if you look at this year's championship, the motivation behind it, you have an opportunity to do back-to-back, number one. And number two, at the start of the year, it took only 4 games to do that. And they're halfway there. They did it the direct route. And when you look at the other semi-final, it's a bit early to be calling it. I'd imagine they'd love a crack off Kilkenny if they got to the final. And, because they were the team that caught him 2 years ago. So it's kind of spicing up in a way that it could work to Limerick's advantage depending who gets there. But, Saturday's a massive day and I can't take that for granted.
Ciaran, the neutrals have been enthralled by the way that Waterford approached this year's championship and the way that Liam Cahill has them playing. But I'm just interested in your take on the narrative surrounding them. History is written by the winners, and they managed to beat both Galway and Tipperary with a swashbuckling, all-dynamic athleticism, full of pace type of a game plan. But it has to be acknowledged as well, they were left clinging on against Galway, bar that late couple of points that just settled the final 60 seconds or so. And Tipperary had the goal chances down the stretch to beat them as well. So I guess we're looking upon Waterford as the winners of those 2 games, and that has completely framed how we're seeing them going into this semi-final. Yet, final quarter of both games, they're clinging on in some respects. I mean, what's your take on the narrative surrounding the way that Waterford have played the second halves in particular of those 2 games?
Yeah, to be fair, there's a huge change in them tactically compared to last year. And I suppose a lot of them have a lot of time to kind of fine-comb Limerick, study what they're doing, study their setup, and the best possible way of implementing your own plan. And to be fair to Waterford, they seem to be doing exactly what Limerick doing. Because John Prendergast, who's their centre forward, he appears to be dropping midfield. 10 and 12 is also coming, so that gives Jamie Byrne and Peter Prendergast, to give a small bit more protection to the defence. And it appears to be Desi Hutchison that's in around the square on his own. But Callum Lyons, Shane Bennett, and Kieran Bennett, they're all the half back line, similar to the Limerick half back line, all comfortable on the ball and all well able to take and score from midfield or the half forward line. And, as I said, and if Shane Bennett is playing as an out-and-out sweeper, he does a serious job, to be fair, because he's a natural hurler, great pair of hands. But I suppose the question needs to be asked then, if he's sweeping, who's going to take up Keane Lynch? Because I think if Shane Bennett probably goes toe-to-toe with Keane Lynch, I don't think he'll be physically strong enough, number one, or probably good enough, number two, to hold him. So if he's going with a sweeper, that is another question then, who's going to pick up Keane Lynch? So an awful lot of questions there to be asked. But to be fairness to Liam Cahill, as you rightly pointed out, they were kind of caught in the first game, but the last 2 games they've been very consistent. And if they can get off to a great start, will be very important. But as you rightly pointed out, they're inclined to leak a few goals, so Limerick will smell that. Probably their full back line isn't as steady, or probably not experienced as it should be. Prunty, without a doubt, would be a serious full back and is having a great year. Ian Kinney is kind of coming, but probably isn't there that long. The other cornerback isn't there, hasn't that much experience. So Limerick will have all that sized up, and they probably will hit Waterford at their weakest, I'd imagine, Saturday.
It's a really interesting point you make about Keane Lynch. Is there a world in which they position Keane Lynch on Bennett and try and force that situation?
You could say, well, in the past they would have tried, when Keane Lynch probably started as an out-and-out midfield. I think they might have in the past tried Jamie Byrne on him. But to be fair to Keane Lynch, no different to John Prendergast when you're starting at 11. You can't be looking at the game with the 90s eyes or 2000 eyes, because 11 sometimes is an 8.5 and sometimes a 7.5. So it's going to be very interesting tactically what way it goes. But obviously Waterford, from a Waterford point of view, they should see a bit of joy here, because the first game, only for the 2 goals against Cork, Limerick kind of struggled. And, and if they look at the Tipperary first half, Tipperary got an awful lot of joy from long puck out. So it'll be interesting, because a lot of pace, a lot of skill, as you rightly pointed out, up front. So, that could be a tactic to go with too as well. Stephen O'Brien or Sean O'Brien, he could be going along with the puck outs.
Where do you see the next step in this Limerick team being tactically? Because there has been a whole host of changes since they won their first All-Ireland in 2018. What do you think happens next, and the changes that you expect to see? Maybe not this season, but over the course of the next couple of seasons.
Yeah, I suppose the conveyor belt is tipping away nicely. Okay, they were caught in the under-20s, but there's still a super talent coming through there. You've young Colonel, you've young English, and you've young Coughlin. And, they'd push more squads as it stands now, probably in the starting 15. And I suppose they have their eye on that all the time. And I suppose the focus isn't as strong as it was on winning underage minor or under-20s. My own take really is, you don't have to win it at that level all the time, but if you're sprinkling 2, 3 or 4 coming through the academy all the time, automatically you're strengthening your squad. But for me to start the year, possibly their line mightn't be as strong, but as the year has gone on, I'm being convinced it's getting stronger as the year has gone on. So to answer your question, I'd say it's more like for like. And if it's not broken, don't fix it. So I'd imagine they'll continue on the same road that they're on.
Because that's a really interesting point you make, that it does seem that maybe when it comes to the star-studded names on the bench, it's not maybe what it was a couple of years ago, maybe when Shane Dowling steps away, you're never going to have a sub of that profile. But from what you're saying, these players are absolutely that good and they will soon have that level of profile.
Oh, without a doubt. As I say, young Coughlin, I think there was a rule there this year. If you're playing under 20s, the seniors possibly, I don't think we're allowed to use the players. And Coughlin, in my opinion, he's nearly ready for the party as it stands. He's a great bit of stuff and a very exciting player. Young English also, outstanding player from Doon. And, young Coughlin, he's been kind of drafted in a few league games. So they're sprinkling them in nice and quietly, and obviously been very intelligent with the game time that they're giving them. So it's a matter of kind of jumping from under 20s to seniors and doing that in a very professional and nice, cute manner for the players. So, their academy is still very strong. And, there's a huge desire still in Limerick, to be kind of successful. They haven't been successful in so many years. My own opinion, you need to save hay while the sun shines. And in fairness to the Limerick squad at the moment, they can smell that there's something special for the last number of years, and that hasn't changed. They're hurling with a bit of arrogance. They have every test and every challenge has been thrown at them in the last number of years, and to be fair to them, they've answered each call. And this Saturday, it's another new test, another new exam, and mentally they're very strong, whereas Waterford traditionally, when they get to this stage in the past, psychologically and mentally, they don't seem to be at the pitch where they should be. So I think the physicality this Saturday and the psychological battle with the Waterford players upstairs is going to be massive if Galway are going to fully come to the park.
Ciaran, it's a new exam for Limerick, yes, but one that they've had 3 weeks to study for, and they have an awful lot of film that they can review in terms of that Galway game and the Tipperary game. And everything that Waterford have been able to bring has been right out there because they haven't been able to do anything but leave it all on the field. So given that Waterford are going into their fourth week running, and they've been tested in all 3 games, including the Laois game, and that Limerick have come in off the back of that extraordinary second half performance in the Munster final and had 3 weeks to watch Waterford, and there'll be nothing that you would feel that Limerick or that Waterford be able to throw at Limerick that will surprise them. Are Limerick in the perfect position going into this game, given everything, all of the advantages that they have in that regard?
Yeah, I suppose there's pros and cons for that. And, I've been talking to a few guys during the week, and they're saying, it is Waterford, 3rd, 4th week, or the 5th week out in a row. What do you think of that? At the start of the year, it's a huge test when you test the feet. But when you get a bit of momentum going, and you're out 2 weeks in a row, you're out 3 weeks in a row, and you're facing the 4th week in a row, at the end of the day, these guys are made to perform on the field. They're serious athletes now. And, the games can come quick and fast when the momentum is going well, when the spirit has gone very high, and the train has gone brilliant. And I'd imagine Waterford are coming from that point of view. And to answer your question, really, I suppose, Saturday will tell the true factual tale in that. 3 weeks, it's a fair old gap, and it's a long time to manage the squad during that period, number one, and number two, to get them up for a semi-final for a Saturday night. And straight away, when I even mentioned the word get up for a semi-final, that should be automatic in running through Limerick veins now. So I suppose to answer that question, you could go left or right when the game is over. Sure, if Waterford are going to win it, they're going to say, yeah, they had the momentum. And if Limerick probably don't cross the line, they are going to say, well, the 3-week gap didn't suit them. So that's the way it's going to go.
But they will have had, I guess, every opportunity to plan for the running of Calum Lyons, for example, from that wing-back position. Do you go with them, or do you maybe cheat a little and ensure that if Limerick and their half-back line, which is just so strong, force a turnover, there should be an awful lot of space in behind? What do you do with Shane Bennett? Do you go toe-to-toe with him, try and get him to defend a little, stop him getting on as much ball as he has done in the previous 2 games? What do they do with Desi Hutchinson, and I'd be interested as a defender, Ciaran, to get your take on it, because he didn't score against Galway, but he wreaked havoc. He got his just reward against Tip, getting 1-3 for everything that maybe didn't quite go his way the previous week. But he's in there on his own, and he's turning 40, 60 balls into balls he probably has no right to win, and winning them. What do Limerick do with him? Do they just go one-on-one with him, or do they have an extra man sitting there in front of him? What would you do with how Waterford are just leaving that one man inside?
Well, I suppose, first of all, as a defence, 2 to 7, that shape has to be held, and if that shape is held, they'll find it extremely hard to manipulate grass in a bit of space. Desi Hutchinson, myself personally, I suppose you have to kind of incorporate a small bit of old style defending with the modern game, and myself personally, I would put someone on it to mark him, number one, and I keep the rest of the defence in, holding their shape. Don't allow a bit of grass to be shown, and obviously then when the opposition are on the ball, put a serious squeeze and pressure on them so they haven't got the added advantage to kind of cock the head up and pick a beautiful pass. So, tactically it's going to be huge, because as I said, Waterford appear to be doing exactly what Limerick have done in the last 3 to 4 years. So it will be interesting to see how Limerick will counteract that, and I'm sure also they would have looked very closely at the Tipperary 6 forwards, in particular in the first half, because none of them stayed still for a second. Every one of them, 13, 14, 15, 10, 11 and 12, they were zipping around the field and crossing over lateral for the first half, and actually it did cause a small bit of panic sessions for Limerick defence in the first half.
Just on that, and it has been quite a talking point in the build-up, Ciaran, the way Limerick need to hold their positions and hold their defence. Why then did Tipperary have such joy in the first half of the Munster final? Did they not hold that, or is there actually an Achilles heel to that system that Tipperary found?
Well, being honest with you, they probably got most of the joy. Okay, you had all the forwards. There was huge movement there, right? And obviously they're trying to create a small bit of confusion here, and that's fine. But myself personally, I thought they got a lot of joy when the goalkeeper kind of, if you like, traditionally kind of went long and obviously took out the midfield and nearly the half-forward line. And their ball appeared to be landing between the half-forward line and full forward line. And any time they went long, they got some bit of joy out of that. So that's another huge tactic I presume Liam Cahill and the boys are looking at as well.
Yeah, if you go long and you win the puck out, I mean, it's a serious advantage, and I mean, Limerick will feel pretty confident, though, I'd imagine, defending the long puck out as well.
Yeah, and I think they've learned from the first half.
Yeah.
As I said, I didn't think they got huge protection from Willem and Dara Donovan in the first half, but in the second half, hugely it stood out for Willem and Dara Donovan were back in front of the half-back line and behind them at stages, and they came out with every second ball in the second half, and that was your launching pad. You're getting ready to attack from there. Like when you win possession at half-back line, you attacked in waves, and that's what the way Limerick go about their business.
What do you think the All-Ireland hurling final is going to be, Ciaran?
It's a fair question now, because the game the following day is it's the making of a cracker as well, and I'm setting up for that one. And I suppose the traditionalists will be kind of going for Kilkenny. Whereas Kilkenny definitely have improved in the last 3 years. They've definitely improved tactically. They're kind of coming to kind of grips with the modern game. Not only that, their bench is getting very strong. And to be fair to Kilkenny, it's the one area of their game, this saying, they empty the tank. Kilkenny empty the 2 tanks every time they go out. That's number one. But I see something I see Cork, and I watched them very close in the first game against Limerick, and I suppose they had an opportunity that day to catch Limerick, because definitely Limerick underperformed, and they took off Gerard Haggerty, Tom Morrissey, Aaron Gillan and Seamus Flanagan that day. So that'll tell you the panic stations that was going on in Limerick, and Cork still didn't put him away. I suppose it's the 2 goals that changed it. But since then, I see a few little tweaks. Even that day, Patrick Collins in goals, he absolutely put Cork under severe pressure with every puck out. And of course, since then, the Donal O'Grady, since he came to the scene and he's analysing it, you can see automatically that has stopped and they're going short or going long. So if I was to kind of put money on it, I possibly could be edging towards Cork, possibly.
Cork, Limerick, right.
So if I'm edging towards Cork, I think you have an idea of who I'm going to say for Saturday.
Yeah. God, that'll be a repeat of the semi-final in 18, and what an unbelievable occasion that was in Croke Park, with 40,000 people hopefully at that final. That will be quite the occasion, especially post-COVID and all that. Ciaran, enjoy the games, enjoy being there. It's great chatting to you, and hopefully from your perspective there'll be a Limerick final to preview.
Yeah, my pleasure, lads. Have a good day and God bless.
Cheers. Limerick hurling legend Ciaran Carey there with us. Now, the Football Pod with Paddy and Andy, our brand new Gaelic football podcast, is the place to be ahead of the All-Ireland football semi-finals. Episode 13 is up and out. Go check it out and subscribe to the podcast. And a reminder that you can get each episode a day early now on the OTB SPORTS app. So make sure to download the OTB Sports app and click subscribe to that podcast, and you'll get it before Spotify or Apple. Now here they are on what Mayo need to do whenever Dublin inevitably play keep ball.
What do Mayo do now when Dublin hold the ball for 3 minutes? Not to steal a term from, I suppose, things, but could you actually just sit down on the pitch, like, because they're just going to hold it for 3 minutes? Why run around burning energy? Do you know? Could you do something? Could you analyse in around that? What do? You just keep pressing them, because they'll keep holding on to the ball, flicking it back. I remember we got an unbelievable press on you, Paddy, in, I think it was the 16 replay. Unbelievable. It was the best bit of Dublin play I think I've ever seen, right? Where we pressed you at the wing to get the ball back. We were point down. And however you got out of it, like Cooper must have touched the ball 25 times in the thing, and he just held it for 2 minutes and he killed us. But like when you were there, as Paddy says, 25 minutes the last day, Kildare out on their feet.
Yeah.
45 minutes last year, Mayo were struggling. Even after half time, when they were down to 14 men, McDade had been sent off. We were struggling a tiny bit with the pace of it. But what do you do? Is there a reason, and I'd hate to see this, that you just stop and let them have it? And just stop playing. Do you know, or make them take a shot.
Make them take the point.
Make them take the point. Give them a free point. Let them kick it over the bar and then start again. Because once they hold it on for 3 or 4 minutes, and Paddy will tell you as a forward, he was in. You were I described this really well. And they hold on to the ball. The game, like 20 minutes is gone. You touch the ball once, it's an inside forward. You're frustrated. You come a bit shorter. All of a sudden they've sucked you away, and you see Ben McCormack taking shots.
Yeah.
Yesterday. 4 misses in the first half yesterday.
Dropping them short.
Himself, yeah.
He's literally by himself.
He's knackered.
In 30 yards, knackered. If he turns back there, he's getting turned over. So he has to shoot. Like, do you know? So can we come up with a strategy to deal with the Dublin holding the ball for 2 or 3 minutes?
I touched on this, Tommy, and we were talking about it yesterday in reviewing the game. You have to be brave. Like if a team is keeping the ball for 4 or 5 minutes, you've got to get out on them. Even if you foul a guy, just foul a guy, and that allows you to get set, and everyone pushes up. But we looked at it yesterday with Kildare, and maybe conditional Kildare were just shattered by the end of the game. They just 15 or 14 guys back at their own 45, and Dublin were keeping the ball out to 65. Brian Howard had about 20 possessions in the space of 2 minutes. Someone needs to go out and like try and tackle him, like, instead of just getting guys back, and you're just back and you're not doing anything.
Yeah, I cannot wait for the Mayo Dublin build-up next week. It's going to be a pretty interesting week. We are going to continue our build-up though this weekend. It is All-Ireland Hurling semi-final weekend, and it is time for our quick picks.
Some of these critics, these pundits, I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable. I'd like to play the hard man when they're on it. It's not very pleasant when you're trying to manage a team. All you're looking for is a bit of civility and a bit of decency, but they just dismiss you like you know, you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
I am having a nightmare at this. I'm not going to lie. We can bring up the scores, I think, straight up, and we won't spend too long talking about the scores. There I am, 37 points at the bottom of the table. Will O'Callaghan in third place on 40 points. And Tommy Rooney last week nails the Cork result because Patrick Horgan nails that late free to get a 3-pointer out of that game. Himself and Will both went right on the Tyrone game. Myself and Adrian both risked it all on Monaghan, and they let us down. If only if only that effort at the end actually went over Morgan's crossbar rather than dropping into Morgan's hands. If only they had a bit more clinicality about them. I don't know. That game could have gone our way. But anyway, Tommy Rooney, you are joint top with Adrian Barry. What a sad little life. I hope you're happy, etc, etc, etc. You're both on 41 points. Have your victory lap, Tommy.
Them's the breaks, Owen. Them's the breaks. Look, we know how this goes. I think I ended up rock bottom with the predictions table last year, even though I called a couple of big results. So that's just the way it happens, the way it flows. So, I'm looking forward to seeing where the table ends up after this weekend. I know we're all kind of on different pages in a few different places.
Dave McIntyre can hop on in and tell us where our predictions should be going, because of course, Dave, if you were playing this, you would be top of the table. You would be leaving us all in your wake, I dare say. Let's have a look at the couple of predictions then for this weekend. Just the All-Ireland hurling semi-finals to get stuck into. So we might go to Limerick versus Waterford first, and everybody's going for Limerick here. So Adrian's going for Limerick by 3, Tommy's going for Limerick by 5, I'm going for Limerick by 6, and Will O'Callaghan is going for the big one. He is going for Limerick by 9. You are not buying into this idea that Waterford are the kryptonite to Limerick, Will?
I'm not. I think the evidence over the last couple of years would indicate that Limerick have Waterford's number. And despite the fact that Waterford have played really well over the last 4 weekends in a row is a big ask. I did expect them to fade against Tipperary last week. I actually thought when Tipperary were reeling them in the final stages that I thought Tipperary might actually turn it around in the closing stages, albeit if it wasn't for a very good save. If Tipperary get that goal, we could well have gone to extra time, and then we end up with a 7-point differential in Waterford's favour. So they didn't wilt at a time that I think many of us expected that Tipperary had a kick in them last week, and to their massive credit, they've now kicked Galway and Tipperary out of the championship in successive weekends, and they will go and have a lash against the Limerick side, who comprehensively took them apart in last year's All-Ireland final. And I expect something similar. I think Limerick got a bit of a wake-up call with the way that they hurled in the first half against Tipperary in the Munster final. We saw the team named overnight with Aaron Gillan restored into their attack. They're not going to take the risk of messing around like they did in the Munster final. They've gone strong for this game tomorrow. I think it's the best possible 15 that they've got onto the pitch. And unless Waterford pull off something absolutely spectacular and pretty much convert every chance that they have, like they did at times during the Tipperary game, I think Limerick are going to run out comprehensive enough winners on this one. Like even last week with Waterford winning by 7, it was a big gap in the end, despite the fact that the game felt quite close in the second half.
It wasn't a hammering.
Do something similar.
Are you calling a hammering here, Will?
I think it'll be is 9 points considered
probably
a hammering
not
at this stage?
Probably not.
7 last week wasn't a hammering. Like it could have been, level in injury time. So what are you saying? Are you saying it's going to be a hammering then?
I think Limerick will win comprehensively enough. I think it won't be like last week, say, where Waterford tacked on that late goal, and that was, the margin of victory at the end of the game. I think Limerick will be deserved 9-point winners when it comes to full time. Like, we're dealing with a team who have had pretty much 2 bad halves of hurling over the last 3 years when it comes to championship. And it's difficult to really expect that Limerick are going to have an off day. I think even if Waterford hurl to their absolute maximum, they're requiring Limerick to be below par if Waterford to have a chance. Understandably, we've all gone for them to win. And I'm hoping that me going for the biggest margin might just see me overtake Tommy and Adrian.
It's tactical. It's tactical going for a 9-point win, no question about it. Do we not think that if there's one other county who can do what Kilkenny did to Limerick 2 years ago, Waterford actually have shown it this summer that they have those tools?
Look, it's continued improvements, lads. Like, Liam Cowell's done a magnificent job with Waterford. If you consider, before he took over, they had 2 years of misery in the championship beforehand. And they've kind of just incrementally been getting a little bit better. He's getting the best hurling out of Austin Gleeson again. And, you look across that team, the Bennetts are playing some really good hurling this summer too. Like, I don't mean to write Waterford off entirely. My strength of conviction about Limerick's victory and the margin of victory is based largely on what I think Limerick are going to do rather than any Waterford shortfalls.
It's based on trying to win this mini league we got going.
That's 100% it. Can I just make a point here, Eoin? That language is very important here. I know Will was reticent to say the word hammerings there, but we saw it with Jack O'Connor last week after the Leinster final, that he came out and said some people are talking about trimmings and hammerings and they were quite disrespectful to Kildare. I was kind of there going, oh God, was that us in the quick picks? But it turns out it wasn't. The words trimming and hammering was used by Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran, so I think he called out the lads a little bit last week without naming them. So language is important here. I actually think that Limerick are going to win by 5, and it isn't going to be a hammering. I think it's going to be quite a similar game to, in a way, not similar to Tipperary. I think Waterford are going to do quite well for 40-50 minutes. I just think Limerick are going to have too much then. Ciaran Carey christened them the Dublin of hurling. And I think that what we're seeing is Limerick in maybe Dublin 2016, 2017. That's where we're seeing this Limerick team at the minute. They're not on the way down right now.
Are you seeing a parallel between Limerick and that Dublin team, Dave?
Ask me in 2 or 3 years' time. I think there's a good chance that we will be likening them to the Kilkenny team that came so close to the 5 in a row, and a Dublin team that have got the 5 in a row and now 6 in a row. I think they are not yet at the peak of where the apex will be. I think they still have room to improve. It's still quite a young team, despite all that they've achieved in the last 4 years under John Kiley. So I think there's definite potential for Limerick to be one of the great sides. It just is going to take a side to take them down a peg or two, like Kilkenny did in 2019, and just throw in the odd huge performance that just derails the Limerick bandwagon here and there. Now, whether that's going to be Waterford this weekend, I'm not sure. I think if this game was a week from now, I'd be looking at it with a different set of a pair of eyes, because I just think the 4 weeks in a row is really going to hurt Waterford against the fittest and the most powerful and explosive team in the country. It's going to come down to goals and benches for me. I think Limerick, they won the All-Ireland last year, conceding 1 goal in 5 games. They've conceded 3 already in their 2 games this season against Cork and Tip. And Waterford have found a way to score goals. They haven't got one in any of the last 2 meetings with Limerick, but they've got 8 in their last 3 against Laois, Galway and Tipperary. And one of the snapshots I think that will be crucial for tomorrow, that Ozzie Gleeson goal against Tip, where it just did not seem like there was a goal on. The point was on all the way through that attack, but they kept looking for it, and they attempted 2 hand passes that probably weren't really the best option, and the ball ended up in the back of the net. I think Waterford are going to have to score 3 or 4 goals tomorrow, and then they're going to have to get the impact that they've been getting from their bench, from the likes of Neil Montgomery, for example, who has come in both games, and he has been really impressive, particularly coming in against Tipperary. I'm not quite sure he featured against Galway. I think he was carrying an injury. But if they can get that same impact from their subs that they've been getting throughout this year's championship, and they go hunting for goals, I think they have a chance. But, I mean, they're 2 massive ifs that you feel Limerick probably have the answer to those questions.
In a word, Limerick by how many, Dave?
Between 4 and 7.
Okay, between 4 and 7. The next of the semi-finals, of course, is going to be Cork against Kilkenny on Sunday. Here's how our predictions look going into the weekend. Adrian's going for Kilkenny by 4, Will's going for Kilkenny by 3, I'm going for Kilkenny by 2, and Tommy Rooney is going for the Rebels, Cork by 2. What's giving you this confidence, Tommy?
I thought we'd be split this week. I'm surprised that it's not 2 and 2. I thought that somebody would have gone with Cork with me. I'm actually surprised now. That doesn't make me doubt it anymore. If you read any of the predictions this week, all the pundits are calling Kilkenny. By all the pundits, I mean Henry Shefflin, Taggy Fogarty, JJ Delaney, even Noel Connors. Bailey, don't start. Sorry, let's start barking here. I might have to run here in 1 second. Cork are going to win this weekend, lads, because Patrick Horgan and Jack O'Connor are going to do more damage than the Kilkenny forwards are. And I'm telling you that. Shane Kingston's going to do more damage than the Kilkenny forwards next week. TJ Reid is obviously going to get a big haul. Is Owen Cody going to stand up again this week? I know he scored 1-5 against Wexford in that brilliant semi-final. I just haven't seen enough from the Kilkenny forwards to say that they are going to do more. And yeah, I just think that Cork are going to do it. I might have a bit of a soft spot for them that I called them last week, and they got me my 3 points, which made a massive difference. But I just think that they've been in good form, and kind of seen shades of that Cork team at the start of the decade that around 2013 that were really exciting to watch. And I think that they're going to have enough to get by Kilkenny this weekend.
Why do you disagree, Will?
Look, it's a game that's a clash of styles. You know, Cork are going to try and run the ball against Kilkenny on Sunday afternoon. They've got a lack of experience of players who've, come through big championship games like semi-finals. I think there's only 2 players who are still left around from the team that got through to the final against Clare in 2013. Maybe Cork can write their own history. That's what Ciaran Kingston has been talking about this week. While I think this Kilkenny team have had lots of experience, even the young players coming through, of big games over the last 3 or 4 seasons. And look, I thought it was a workmanlike performance by Kilkenny in the Leinster final, but Dave mentioned the substitutes going into this weekend. I don't know if there's any team in the last 4 who've got potentially more impact from the bench than Kilkenny do. So if things aren't going well for Brian Cody's side, he's able to bring forwards, particularly in that game, to try and change things around against Cork. I think there's still some question marks about Cork's defence going into this weekend too. I would love Patrick Horgan to win an All-Ireland title. I think I said that a couple of weeks ago when they were facing into the qualifiers. I would love them to win, but I think this matchup favourable to Kilkenny. And I remember a couple of years ago when there was a lot of hype about Cork, they went and took on Kilkenny, and Kilkenny bossed them in 2019 in the quarterfinals on their route to getting through to the final. I think something similar will happen, but like all of our predictions seem to be playing out, I think we're all looking at this one being a pretty close one, and probably one that's in the balance with a few minutes to go.
Last word.
Oh, wait. Sorry. Are you not chasing here, Locke?
Am I what? Not chasing? It's. I'm just an honest guy who predicts honestly, whereas you guys are obviously predicting tactically. But you look where that has ended. Has left me on the bottom of the table. But look, at least I'll come away with my head held high and my honesty intact. Whereas you two scumbags predicting tactically is just not acceptable. Dave McIntyre, how do you see this one going?
Wow, you didn't hold back there. I think we know exactly what we're going to get from Kilkenny this Sunday, and we just don't quite know what we're going to get with this young, developing Cork team. And so I will err on the side of caution and go with Kilkenny. I think the point that Will made about the Kilkenny bench is one that's well made. He's got so many options from John Donnelly. He's got Walter Welsh coming in. James Bergen is at a big season off the bench. Michael Carey as well. And that's before you get to sort of the really experienced operators like Killian Buckley, who could come in and do a great job for Brian Cody. Cork have the potential to explode into Croke Park on Sunday and announce themselves as the next great Cork side. But that's a huge if, and having watched how Kilkenny handled Wexford, particularly in extra time in that Leinster semi-final, don't think they were really tested by Dublin in the final. I would just give the nod to Kilkenny. I think they will have enough in their locker to get it done, maybe over the 70 minutes. But I expect Cork at one point in the game to have us on the edge of our seats thinking this could be happening for them now.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way of looking at it. Lads, good stuff. That is this week's Quick Picks.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time from, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
Yeah, we're going to be joined by Rob Kearney in just a moment to look ahead to the third and final test of the British and Irish Lions tour. I might bring you through some of the other back pages, which I didn't get to a little bit earlier on. The Irish Daily Mail goes with the £100 million man. Grealish signs for City, and could they land Messi too? That is the big story that developed around the same time as Jack Grealish being announced last night, that Barcelona and Lionel Messi may be about to part ways. We will have Graham Hunter with us in about 20 minutes time to parse through the details in a bit of depth. Heart of Gold is the back of the Irish Daily Star. Kelly's belief sees her in touching distance of glory, and the rest of the paper is really leading with a mixture of Jack Grealish and Kelly Harrington. But now at 8:51 on this Friday morning, delighted to welcome Rob Kearney back to the show. Rob, good morning to you. How are you keeping?
Good, thanks, Eoin, and yourself?
Yeah, very well, thanks. So, watching the first couple of tests of this series, are you looking at those 160 minutes and thinking to yourself, geez, I'd love to be out there, or are you thinking it's not a great place to be a fullback?
I think you'd always love to be out there, wouldn't you? Any sort of competitive player. It's a great place to be a fullback if you're making all your catches, and it's a lonely place to be at fullback when you're not, and they've been as contested as heavily as they are. So listen, fullback's always one of those positions. It's either lonely when the days are going wrong, or you're flying high when they're going well.
A lot of people, I think Alan Quinlan referred to a lot of the aerial battles last weekend as 50-50s. Did you see it that way, that they are 50-50s, or is the way they've been put up in the air actually favouring the Springboks and hence their success in that department?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of them have been 50-50s. Now there's probably 5 or 6 balls in there which the Lions should have managed to take. They're big momentum swings in games when you lose those aerial battles. Now, to be fair to South Africa, the kicks have been on point, which makes it a little bit more difficult. But also the nature of catching high balls has changed a lot over the last number of years. That maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, you'd always have 2 guys going for the ball in the area in the air, just making it one single contest. Now you've got 3 or 4 Springboks or the Lions on the other side who are just charging at the ball, not necessarily trying to catch it, but just trying to force a knock on or create a breaking ball, a bit like in Gaelic football, where you're trying to create scraps and hope that you'll pick it up on the ground then. So it has become a lot more competitive in the last couple of years.
How do fullbacks then react to that change, Rob, and how would you have reacted to that?
I think you've got to put a lot of pressure on the guys around you to make sure that you're getting as much protection as you can in the air. The guys in the front line who have recognised that the kick has happened, they've got to work back really hard and make sure that they're getting some sort of block in on the Springbok players who are trying to contest for that. You've got to make their line of entry as long and as complicated as possible. So, they're having to do a few swerves, a bit of zigzagging, or that they lose the sight of the ball in the air.
And
Rob,
sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Rob, there's been so many parallels with the 09 tour, not least the fact that South Africa have come into it on the back of a World Cup victory and won in largely the same way in 07 and 2019. When you were preparing for those test matches, was there a feeling that we have to take the Springboks on at their own game to have any chance of winning this test series, as appears to be the case now with Warren Gatland? Or was there a feeling, no, we have to make them uncomfortable, we have to stretch the game, we have to keep the ball on the field, and we have to try things that they're not necessarily used to?
Yeah, it was a combination of both. So Warren Gatland, we know, doesn't like kicking the ball out too much. So historically loves keeping the ball in play, ideally down the 15-metre channels. I've been a little bit surprised at the Lions' strategy over the last couple of weeks. It's as if they're trying to play the Springboks at their own game. Now we've seen a couple of changes this week. Ali Price in again after that first test. When you saw him picked, you think, okay, maybe they're going to try and take the ball on around the fringes a little bit more. But they kicked, and he kicked a lot of box kicks. So you asked the question, well, why not start Conor Murray? But it's the one part of his game that he is considerably better over Ali Price at. I think sometimes when it comes down to the third test, everything is on the line. As a team, as a coaching group, you're encouraged just to release the shackles a little bit and to have a go from a few more opportunities that you might not have done in the previous few weeks, and sort of hopefully we'll see the Lions throw the kitchen sink at them a little bit.
And do you think those changes in the back line point towards a different approach game plan wise, or just doing what they attempted to do last weekend a bit better?
I think they're probably getting caught in between. The selection would say, okay, we're going to try and open the game up a little bit more. We're going to try and be a little bit braver. Put Finn Russell on the bench. If 20 minutes to go, he'll come on and, he'll try his box of tricks and all of these little things. But I expect that the Lions are going to get caught into the same sort of game plan as the last few weeks, this weekend again.
So the expectation then with the changes is to do the same thing, but to do it better. And it's interesting listening to Liam Williams speak in the build-up to this game. He was asked who the best in the world is at catching the high ball, and he said, you're looking at him. He says, if I don't believe in myself, nobody else is going to believe in me. It's brilliant to see that sort of confidence, and I assume when you're actually trying to find the deciding factor in the 50-50 balls, as we just mentioned, something like that kind of does matter.
Yeah, it's enormous. And, Liam Williams is superb in the air, and he's probably better than Stuart Hogg. But we've known exactly what the Springboks are going to bring for the last number of years: scrum, set piece, and the aerial battle. And, it's a bit like the scrum. If you lose the aerial battle in a game, you're going to lose the game. So, again, that's why I was probably a little bit surprised to see Stuart Hogg starting over the last few weeks, because we knew that it was the one area of the game that he's probably a little bit susceptible under. So, you'd hope now the changes they've made in the back three, that they're going to tighten up those aerial gains, and when the ball is kicked, that they're eating every single ball up in the air. So then the Springboks all of a sudden think, okay, we're not getting the same sort of access into this game. We have to alter our plan. And that's what you want to do with them. You want to try and get them to alter their plan a little bit, because it's so simplistic what they do, but it's very difficult to stop.
What makes Liam Williams so good in that department?
It's technique, it's timing. That's really the only thing with catching high balls. You've got to be very confident, which from his interview during the week, it seems that he's really backing himself in that facet of the game. But it's a one-on-one thing, isn't it? It's a bit like throwing into the line out. It's just you and the ball. And when I was playing, And I look back into those tests in 2009, you know, the only thing I wanted Mornay Stein to do was to kick high balls on me. Pinar the same, you know, you're just praying, kick the ball on me, and that's your access into the game.
We were actually watching it back with Brian O'Driscoll a few weeks ago, that second test in 2009. It was an incredible performance from you, but at the same time you could tell that they were trying to target you. Like, are you relishing that at the same time when you know that the ball is going to be coming to you so frequently?
100%. After the first few, and you know you're going well and you're having a good game, the only thing that you want the opposition to do is kick a high ball on you. And I was lucky in that game that's the only thing that they kept continuing to do.
Rob, the Finn Russell conundrum, and you mentioned it briefly there. If, for example, I'll just put a sort of a hypothetical out there, it's 15-all going into the last 15, 20 minutes. Dan Biggar is still on the pitch and fit. There's no injury or fatigue issue. Do you see Warren Gatland bringing Finn Russell into the game to manage that last 20 minutes? Or is the only scenario in which Russell gets any game time if the Lions are 12 points down going into the last quarter and something seismic has to change?
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter, isn't it? You know, Finn Russell is superb at creating something out of nothing. Now, we do know that he's capable of the odd mishap as well. So I suspect if the game is 15-all with 15 minutes to go that he's not going to be on the field. But it is very, very likely that this game is going to be in the balance with 10 or 15 minutes to go. And this again, sort of the selection that it's a little bit tough to get your head around, because you look at Conor Murray. In that first test, he came on and he closed the game out unbelievably well. He brought real calmness and assuredness to the game. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why he's on the bench again this week, that if it's tight with 15 minutes to go, we can take Murray on, he'll slow the game down, he'll make really good decisions, and he'll close out the game for us. And then you look at Finn Russell in the number 10 shirt and you say, well, does that strategy really up with our number 10? So, you know, your guess is as good as mine when it comes to Warren Gatland's selections.
But in all likelihood, he doesn't get on the field, which then seems like a little bit of a waste of a bench option. It's Warren Gatland is hoping that the Lions are winning going into the last 15 minutes. If the Lions are winning, Russell doesn't come in.
Yeah, he's hoping that, but you know, Dan Biggar's come off in the last few games with a HIA once. He got a bang in the knee another time. You know, see, you've got to take, as a coach, all of these things into your head that, you know, there's a very good chance that Dan Biggar's not going to last 80 minutes of rugby. So, you know, they must have some sort of faith in Finn Russell to be able to close out a game, because otherwise he wouldn't be there, knowing that that is a very strong possibility.
What is the difference, in your view, between Robbie Henshaw at 12 and Robbie Henshaw at 13 then?
Well, there's a little bit more space for him to attack it at 13. You know, Robbie is someone who's got unbelievable footwork. He's a great sidestep and he's able to get himself out of trouble very well. Now, we don't get to see that as much when he's playing at 12, just because the amount of time and space isn't there, and you're asked to 9 times out of 10 carry the ball forward, get some gain line. Exactly what we're going to see from Bundy this weekend. You know, so you'd hope that he'll get a little bit more space to try and create things. He's a really good distribution game, which will help the Lions get the ball to the edges. When we talk about the Lions been brave in attack, you know, he's probably one of the guys who has the ability to throw that ball to the edge and try and get some width on the play. Now, it's easy for us to sit here and say the Lions need to be braver in attack. The Springboks play unbelievably high. Their wingers play high. Willie LaRue closes very early. So you don't want to be that guy who throws an intercept in a test match of a Lions game, because we know tries are so precious in these test matches, and 7 points can be the game. So, you know, in some respects, you've got to take your hat off to the Springboks as well. Or a team that have played very little rugby in the last couple of years, who've been battling with quarantine and COVID and all the disruptions of that. They've been pretty impressive this last few weeks.
Yeah, they certainly have. On LaRue, who you mentioned there, O'Driscoll was saying on the show last night that maybe he could be got at defensively. Is that something you go along with?
Yeah, I think so. But like defensively, in terms of what is that putting the ball in behind him or taking him on one-on-one with the ball in hand? Certainly, defensively, he closes so high and so hard that there is a lot of kick space into those corners that he's leaving. Now, the only problem with that is that the speed of the Springboks defence is coming off the line so hard and so aggressively that you don't get that time and space to execute those kicks. So we saw Eoin Farrell get charged down one of the games a few weeks ago. He recognised and identified that the space was in the backfield because Willie LaRue was closing so hard, but he got charged down and they go and score the other end of the field.
Is there anything... Sorry, Dave.
Sorry. Why, Rob, haven't the lines varied it a little more? Like, there was so much talk when you were the Ireland team about that additional kicking option with your left foot, that you might get the ball to first or second receiver, but then you reverse the ball back out to someone like yourself in the hope that a Willie LaRue has vacated that position, and then it's the full back that can stick the ball over the top. They haven't seemed to utilise that at all.
No, and that's when I saw Elliot Daly picked up 13 in that first test. For me, that was the reason I thought, okay, they've clearly identified that Willie LaRue's playing high. They're going to use him, throw him a skip one ball on an overs line that he has a little bit of kick space into that corner. I would like to have seen the Lions maybe been a little bit more inventive off starter plays, off those first 3 or 4 phases, where they know they're going to be able to exploit the space in the backfield. That you manipulate certain defenders where you know that on this 3rd or 4th phase, you'll have time and space to kick the ball into this corner. Willie LaRue is going to be high. We can all move forward. And that's how we get into their half. Because that's the biggest problem they're having at the moment. They don't want to play rugby in their own half, which is fair enough because, the Springboks will punish you. They'll turn over penalties. They'll kick 3-6-9 like we've seen. So they're trying to wait to play their rugby until they get into the opposition half. They're just finding it difficult to do that.
So you think that the build-up of phase play where you get the ball into the hands of someone like Eoin Farrell, as you mentioned there, is telegraphing the move a little bit and allowing them to block the kicker just a little bit more effectively?
Yeah, a little bit. And, you see some phase plays over time where, you might not kick until the 4th phase, but it's after 3 phases of going the same way, and then you've got a left footer coming back behind the ruck who sticks it into that opposition corner. And that's what I mean about being a little bit more creative with some of the set pieces, that it's not always necessarily going off 10 who's sitting in the pocket, because it becomes pretty telegraphed then.
It does seem from what you're saying that there are slight tweaks that can lead to a lot of success for the Lions tomorrow. That maybe the narrative this week has been a little bit like too much kicking, the ball's going high too often, and that's simply not good enough. But actually it's the way in which the ball is being kicked, or the decision making really, which let them down last Saturday and is a relatively fixable thing before tomorrow.
Yeah, it is fixable. But it all starts at the breakdown as well. When you're kicking the ball, you want to kick on your terms. When you've got good quick ball, when you've manipulated the backfield defence a little bit, and you know that you're kicking to space. The worst time to kick is when it's off slow rough ball. The back 3 are holding back a little bit more because they can see the 10 sitting in the pocket. And the 10 sitting in the pocket because the ball's a bit slower because he knows the opposition defence is going to be rushing on him harder. So like a lot of these things, it starts with the speed of ball at the ruck, and these South African guys are so big and so strong that they're just slowing every ruck ball down.
Rob, it's interesting that we have you on the back of 2 tests that, let's face it, for the neutral and for the casual rugby fan, have not been easy on the eye, and wouldn't encourage you to sit down and watch rugby every weekend. Given your time that you've just spent with Western Force in Australia and the trialling of a couple of those rules, most notably the 50-22 rule, are you looking at maybe last week's test, and given the fact that we've just spent 10 minutes talking about the kicking game, thinking how different it could potentially be for the Lions if the 50-22 rule was in place and they had the option to kick the ball from deep out for their own line out deep inside the South African 22, and that maybe test matches like we've seen last week and the week before might just herald a few more people in positions of power deciding that this is the sort of changes that we need?
Yeah, I think so. Now, listen, when when you get to high-pressure games of semi-finals, World Cup finals, Lion Test Series, whatever, there's always going to be a lot more kicking. It's just the nature of it. Teams are less comfortable to play with the ball inside their own half. It is very, it's low risk, it's high reward. So that's the way the game has always been, over the last 10 years or so. This new rule, I think it will help a little bit in keeping two men in the backfield. You have to religiously play a 13-2, which is 13 front line, 2 in the backfield. Some teams will try and get away with a 14-1 and have the 15 on a single man pendulum behind the ball. So you won't be able to do that anymore. So you'd have to think that there's going to be a little bit more space on the front line, which is good for attacking sides because it means that they'll be prepared to take a few more risks. And one man is a lot of space on front line defence. It can make a big difference. So it'll be interesting to see how the laws go. I think you'll be surprised at how few times it actually comes off for one reason or another. When I started, I thought, okay, you get one of these every game. It's harder to try and find them, and if you do go for it too many times too often and you just kick loose rubbish ball away, your pack get pretty disappointed with you very quickly.
Call it for us tomorrow, Rob.
I think if the Lions start really well, they need to get a 10-point win. A 10-point advantage in that first half. If they're not up at halftime, I don't see them winning. The strength of this South African bench that's going to come on, they'll scrum, they'll win penalties, they'll close out the game too easily. So if the Lions are winning at halftime, I see them to win. If not, I think it's going to be another tough day for them.
Right, very interesting. Great analysis this morning, Rob. Really appreciate your time.
Cheers, lads. Thank you.
Thanks a million. Rob Kearney there on the line with us. Right, at 9:10, I can tell you that we've got the OTB Sports Olympics show across all of our social channels live at 5 p.m. every evening throughout the Olympics, bringing you the biggest stories of the day and also taking a look ahead at what's to come. It's in association with Indeed, who are proud to support Team Ireland at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Indeed believes the world works better when people are given every opportunity to unleash their true talents, and the hashtag is Talent Unleashed. We're back after these, chatting to Graham Hunter about the latest around Lionel Messi's future.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Football Pod with Paddy and Andy, our new weekly Gaelic football show with Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran.
Yes, Dublin aren't in great form, but they're bored out in their mind time. Paul Mannion and Jack McCaffrey aren't playing, yes, because of the stress and strain, but they're a bit bored, like. They're mid-20s, they should be still playing football for Dublin. The likes of Conor O'Callaghan needs a Mayo coming to Croke Park, needs to be playing a Kerry in an All-Ireland final to really get themselves going, and I think that's where it's at.
Download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to the GAA podcast feed now.
Say me dad waking up at half walk, getting his porridge and cycling 15-20 kilometres to Premier Birdies to walk.
His success is my success. I feel like him win the medals like me win the medal, I would almost give up my success for his success. That's how much it means for me.
We did stand for the national anthem and we did sing it like we would if we had been in Tokyo. Certainly you could say we're certifiably insane.
For the best Olympics coverage, subscribe to the OTB Highlights podcast feed on the OTB Sports app now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
12 minutes past 9 on this Friday morning. You're with us here on OTB AM. It is time to turn our attention to the biggest story in sport right now, which is, of course, the future of Lionel Messi. Delighted to welcome Graham Hunter back to the show. Graham, good morning.
Oh, how are you?
So, you were on with the lads last night, basically debunking this idea that he's definitely gone and that this is basically a standoff and a power play from Barcelona towards La Liga. So, who is going to blink first in this, Barcelona or La Liga?
Yeah, I mean, the point I was trying to make last night was that this is Laporta's Hail Mary pass. He's out of time, he's out of resources. And the idea, the key thing to hold on to here now is that, as I said last night, it may result in Messi going to another club. It may well do. Because a Hail Mary pass, by definition, a power play of any description, when it goes wrong, poker fans like all in. When it goes wrong, you're left with nothing. So, who's going to blink first, you said? first indication about blinking will come in about an hour when Joan Laporta, the Barcelona president, who inherited a club where they were spending 110% of turnover on wages. Now, never mind Football Club Barcelona, never mind Messi. No company in the world can exist like that. It's one of the things, it's one of the ugly warts on the beautiful body of football that people point to and say, why does football get to exist like this when any commercial business that was run like that would go out of business? Their creditors would be chasing them. So long and short is, if La Liga were to blink and say, okay, we will reduce our financial fair play rules specifically for Messi because La Liga needs him almost as much as Barcelona need him. It's a terrible can of worms to open. It's not impossible to see. I've had a little bit of a nudge from La Liga that they're not interested in making special cases because they believe that the financial fair play of La Liga is protecting other clubs that can't live with the amount of debt that Barcelona have, 1.4 billion of debt. And therefore, I see what's, Laporta felt, and this is what I was trying to communicate to Nathan last night, Laporta felt that he was in a corner, but he had two options that were almost no-lose. One, you make this explosive declaration that Leo Messi and his father, Jorge, weren't expecting. And let's be clear, this is what I wanted to make clear last night. Barcelona and Leo Messi had reached an agreement. They'd negotiated an agreement, which Barcelona had been trying to register with La Liga, trying to find a way to register with La Liga. And this agreement was total. How much he would be paid, and it would be much more than a 50% cut in wages and bonuses for Messi. That he would stay till 2026, okay, with a break clause either way at 2023. So Barcelona, Messi, and in fact La Liga were about to be delighted. The key situation was that La Liga wasn't going to lose its crown jewel that brings audiovisual rights, that brings sponsors, that brings attention. Barcelona weren't going to lose their key player, and Messi wants to stay. That's something that, again, I thought was crucial to mention. But La Liga, whether they blink and say, we'll make a special case for you, I was pointing out last night that Ángel Torres, the president of Getafe, who suffered at the hands of Messi, was saying last week, we should make a special case. There should be manoeuvrability over this. Whether that's going to happen or not, if I was forced to predict, I think maybe La Liga won't budge. But when I said Laporta believed this all-in move was no lose, he by doing this, he has firmly put the blame on two parties. I don't think he's right to blame financial fair play at La Liga because Barcelona is a club where the backside was sticking so far out the window you could have parked a bike in it. It's just they were in the wrong completely. And secondly, Laporta is able to not only say, well, it's because of La Liga that we can't register this deal to keep fans, to keep Messi, the guy you wanted, I wanted. So La Liga, they're going to blame. They're going to blame Bartomeu, the ex-president of Barcelona, who left Laporta inheriting a club at 110%, salaries were bigger than turnover. So Laporta can come out of this well in almost any way. But the original idea of this Hail Mary is to see whether La Liga will blink and say, okay, it's Messi. We'll make an exception. My guess is that might not happen.
Right. Graham, would La Liga have been more likely to blink in this situation were it not for the European Super League fiasco?
There is an absolute and complete bitter divide between Barcelona and Real Madrid, united for once. The classical enemies are united in this one against the way in which Javier Tebas, whose position I unequivocally support. I unequivocally support what Javier Tebas, and there were many people in your country and in the Premier League who spoke out the same. I think that Tebas, on behalf of La Liga, is right to bitterly oppose and criticise the Superliga as devised by Florentino Perez and his rat pack of chums. But the debate, Barcelona and Real Madrid, as your listeners will know, tuning into Off the Ball AM every morning, there are only three clubs who are fighting to keep the Super League alive. Two of them are in Spain, the Clasico enemies, and Juventus. And right now, for example, it is vital for people to understand that earlier in the week, La Liga announced an in-principle deal with CVC Partners, who took a bad reputation out of their management of Formula One. Let's be blunt about that. CVC Partners, where the headline figure was 2.7 billion euros coming into La Liga, which would be dispersed across everything from the grassroots to women's football, through the smaller clubs, and 250 million each straight to Barcelona and Real Madrid. Now, Real Madrid and Barcelona have attacked that over the last 24 hours. They put out communiques which, really used the most powerful possible language to say, we weren't consulted, we don't want this isn't legal, we don't support it. But you're right, going back to your point, they didn't want Javier Tebas at the head of La Liga, a guy who's done an awful lot of good for La Liga, his position to be more powerful, his argument to the other clubs in Spain that they must try and corral Real Madrid and Barcelona into a position where they cannot continue to support the Superliga. So Messi is partly a victim of the mini war, and in football terms, it is a war that's going on between the two biggest clubs in Spain and La Liga over the Super League. So you're right to introduce that element, and there are those who are, now that I've mentioned it, there are those who are saying that Tebas has sold too much of the audiovisual rights to CDC partners, even for 2.7 billion euros. That influx of cash is coming at a time when many of the clubs are gasping for air. You could say the same about any of the leagues you cover, probably any of the sports, but not many sports live in such debt all the time, permanently, as elite football does. So it's a complicated story worthy of Mario Puzo.
Well, yeah, absolutely. What about so if we get into the self-preservation element of Tebas's position here and the different factors at play, do you think he will be looking at what Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain can offer Lionel Messi without restrictive domestic financial fair play laws, and allied to that, very non-restrictive continental FFP laws? As we now know, as a result of COVID, they've been relaxed to a point. Is he not looking at them saying, oh my God, the product in the Premier League is going to get so much stronger, maybe even in Ligue 1, and that too damages our league?
You asked me to guess, to estimate who'd blink first. My estimate is, and based on a couple of texts I had last night that come from La Liga, which didn't say no, but said this could be the end. If we move on this could be the end of FFP in Spain. But you make a good point, and this is the two principal people I think are in the horns of a dilemma right now. One is Leo Messi, and most football fans will probably be more interested in that because, again, these are human beings we're talking about. We don't need to only talk about it in terms of back pages and money. Football is about human beings. That's why we're so addicted to it. Not because of the stats of the money, but because it's the biggest human drama that can compare to theatre or opera, ballet, art. It doesn't matter. Leo Messi came to Barcelona yesterday thinking he was signing a deal to keep himself in the city that he loves and play for the club that he loves. So this morning, although he's got resources, he can negotiate with other clubs, that option's been taken away from him as we speak. So he's in the horns of a dilemma. But as you pointed out, so is Tebas, because what do you do? Do you roll with the situation and say, we will give a window of opportunity for Barcelona? Is the time to go and consult all his constituent members, all the clubs? What will they say? What would Real Madrid say? Real Madrid would say no. So Tebas does have the dilemma you point out that I don't think he's living in fear of Ligue 1 being better marketed or a bigger product than La Liga. The Premier League is the thing that he's set himself at. So what has he been in charge of La Liga now? Maybe 6 going on 7 years. During that time, there has been a change in the financial situation in Spain. There's been more competitiveness from other clubs. He has divided the cake more evenly. And he's trying to copy the Premier in terms of marketing. La Liga Television just signed Gary Lineker. There were in the first 5 hours of that announcement, there were over 2 million hits on Twitter alone on that announcement. The idea is exactly what you're talking about, to try to compete with the professionalism, the modernisation, the branding, the unity of the Premier League in terms of their negotiating. They want to fight the Premier League in terms of, are we biggest in China? Are we biggest in Africa? Are we biggest in the Middle East? Are we biggest in the States? Okay, so that's guaranteed. And Messi is taking a brick away from that wall that he's building. You're right. But once he changes, he's going to be harangued by the media, by fans, by other clubs. I don't know how he will resolve that dilemma, but you asked what's on his mind, and Leo Messi going to the Premier League or Paris Saint-Germain will annoy him. And Paris Saint-Germain and Manchester City are the two clubs that Tebas most attack, saying they're state-funded, which both clubs deny, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it's a horrible situation for Tebas. We're in the middle of a high-stakes poker game, and it is not simply about the future of Leo Messi. It's about egos. It's about presidents who don't like each other, Florentino Perez and Javier Tebas, and Laporta trying to be the witty, clever one in between, getting, pinching food off everybody's table.
And yet, Graham, Messi is the pawn who's caught in the middle of all this. And does this announcement last night trigger a flurry of activity in the background on behalf of his team, or is that activity that has all been going on for months now. Are they really looking at their options now, and whether that's MLS, PSG, Man City, maybe heading back to Argentina, whatever that might be, but are they suddenly now on high alert, engaging a full court press in terms of getting all possible options further down the line on the table for Messi?
Dave, you know the answer to that. Of course they are. He has pledged that he wants to be playing a high level football. Having won the Copa America, his attention now turns to trying to win the World Cup in Qatar. I don't think that Argentina showed enough in what was a pretty brutal Copa America. And if you looked at the final in which, they went back to Catenaccio of the 70s and they kicked Brazil off the park, it was a rare win. It was an unusual win. But there is no doubt that amongst the Argentinian fans, the FA, but most particularly Tony and his players, the idea is now, okay, transfer that to going one step further than they've managed in the Messi era in the World Cup. Messi wants to be playing elite level football. I can't imagine how Phil Neville's about to become Leo Messi's coach at Inter Miami. Easy, lads. Inter Miami is somewhere that I do see Messi eventually going. I reported on La Liga television a couple of years ago that the finances were being built to try and tempt Suarez and Messi together to Inter Miami, but playing there in the build-up to World Cup, no, it doesn't make sense. Where he plays, and Dave, I'm not embarrassed about going back to re-emphasize my point. This might be a myth, a legend, the greatest or second greatest player ever, but he's a human being. He's got kids, he's got a wife. He wanted to stay at this club. It's been thrown at him out of the blue. The clubs that you said no to, it's not a begging bowl that he's going back with, but he has to go back and knock on doors. Fellas, now, how did you introduce your question? You talked about Leo Messi as the opponent. Did you ever really think you'd be using that phrase about Leo Messi?
No, it's incredible.
Who's the most coveted, most beautiful, most extraordinary football of our journalistic lifetimes. Then also, how weird is it that he's knocking on the door at Paris Saint-Germain and Manchester City? It's a bit embarrassing, but when I said no, a month ago, what I really, it's a ridiculous situation. And football's a pragmatic game. They're a pragmatic family. And yes, they're on, red alert now, full court press, as you say. But they will not have given up on the idea that La Liga potentially move a little bit. Or if there's suddenly, which I don't imagine, an extraordinary move that takes Griezmann away, lowers the salary bill because Griezmann suddenly moves with whatever. They play a week on Sunday. It's Barça Real Sociedad to open La Liga at the Camp Nou a week on Sunday. I don't see, and listen, neither of you mentioned this, but for people who are listening to Off the Ball AM to understand it fully, I guess a lot of people believe that Kun Aguero is a Barca player, that Eric Garcia is a Barca player, that Memphis Depay is a Barca player, and Emerson, they moved from... None of them are registered yet, because the Liga won't allow Barcelona to register these new signings because they're so far away from meeting the financial fair play regulations. Now, in practical terms, Laporta's got to think, well, a week on Sunday, we play our first match. We have to have these new players registered. So there is an enormous dilemma. And every player in this high-stakes poker game is carrying 2 or 3 different hands and going, well, which one is the most powerful? Which one do I play? Which opponent do I want to knock out first? It's high octane. It's complicated. And there will be damage, collateral damage done nearly everywhere. I say to you again, and I think this will come out this morning when Laporta has his press conference, I think Laporta believes that he's played the hand that leaves him, in terms of how he markets his work, in a no-lose situation. Because he's now, if Messi goes, he's going to blame Bartomeu, the previous president, he's going to blame La Liga, but he's going to be able to get on with registering these players and saying, okay, I can be the president who lost Messi, but it'll be held as being something that's completely out with my blame, out with my fault. Now, that's a very pleasant position for Laporta to be in suddenly.
Well, one of the other things here, Graham, and this is purely, I'll put my hands up here, this is from trying to read all this stuff on this subject that I completely ignored because of the Euros and because of the Olympics last night. One of the things that maybe is going under the radar here is that Real Madrid are also screwed. They're just not as screwed as Barcelona, but when you compare their previous available salary cap compared to their current available salary cap, that has also nosedived in a Barcelona-esque manner. Obviously, they don't have the best footballer in the world, so it's less headline grabbing, and maybe they have been smarter with their finances than Barcelona over the last couple of years. But there's problems coming for them. Am I right in that?
No, I agree with your snapshot analysis of them is right. Their salary level has to come down because their revenue has come down. This is healthy. These things that we're not marketing as problems for Real Madrid and Barcelona are under. It's like when you say, "Doctor, I really don't like this chemo." Well, do you like living? You know, it's deeply unpleasant, but FFP is for the benefit of the individual clubs and La Liga as a whole. But there is a difference in how you termed it, because you said they were equally screwed. They've suddenly, against their will, lost the salaries, the outgoing salaries of Ramos and Varane. That changes their picture dramatically.
Sure.
And there is clearly a scenario where, because Florentino Perez is hope against hope that he can take Mbappe this season. I think the chances are still very, very low. But let's say Paris Saint-Germain, where the relationship between Mbappe and Leonardo, the sports director, is terrible. Mbappe's 1 year for going out of contract. I think the logical position is that he sees that contract out and leaves for free, like Alaba just did from Bayern Munich, and goes to Real Madrid. But let's say Messi goes to Paris Saint-Germain. I'm not saying that I know it's going to happen, but it is one of the clubs that wanted him, whereby you can see the fit in terms of their wish to win the Champions League, their wish for profile. Pochettino's an Argentinian coach that knows Messi very well indeed. Neymar would be an attractive playing partner for Messi. Excuse me. You can write your own rationale there. Let's say Messi does go there, hypothetically. Does that mean that Paris Saint-Germain suddenly will say, "I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to pay his wages by taking money now for Mbappe rather than losing him for free, because we stubbornly weren't even contemplating that before." And Mbappe pitches up at Madrid, and we have a summer whereby, out of the blue, not at the 11th hour, but the 9th and a half hour, Messi goes and Mbappe comes in. And into all of this, the CVC partnership, who are buying a 10% stake in La Liga offshoot for 2.7 billion euros. That was announced this week, but remember, it was announced as a deal in principle. So that money isn't safe yet for La Liga or for Javier Tebas. It's vital money. But CVC, as of yesterday, it's still business hours. New York is behind us in Spain in terms of the clock. So in business hours, CVC were phoning Tebas and saying, "Okay, see that money? See that agreement? What do you mean no Messi? Messi's not even going to be there for the beginning of it. It's a long-term thing." So that phone is going to be ringing saying, "Well, I tell you what, if the deal's still on, we're restructuring it, different money, lower money." This is a hornet's nest, but that hornet's nest might produce honey, which is not normal. The honey being Mbappe to Madrid. And suddenly Florentino Perez, you said they were equally screwed. He said, "Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows?"
There are varying different degrees of being screwed, I guess. If you're screwed with Kylian Mbappe, you're not doing too badly, especially if your main rival doesn't have Lionel Messi. Graham, great stuff as ever. We know a hell of a lot more, I guess, in an hour's time when Laporta has done his press conference. We'll chat to you again soon. Space. No doubt.
You're right, Eoin.
Cheers, man.
Cheers, man.
Graham Hunter there on the line, live from Spain. It is an absolutely fascinating one. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. We've got plenty coming up on OTB Sports Radio across the day. Friday Night Racing live from 3 o'clock. The Olympic Show is live from 5 o'clock. And Off the Ball is live tonight from 7 o'clock on the OTB Sports app and on your radio. We'll have live coverage of the Third Lions test in South Africa tomorrow evening. And James Skehill is at Waterford versus Limerick for us. Tommy Welch will be in Croke Park on Sunday for Off the Ball as Kilkenny take on Cork. We'll be back on OTB AM on Monday morning. Dave, thanks a million for being with us this morning.
Pleasure, Ron. Thank you.
Enjoy the weekend, and we'll be tuning in for your commentary tomorrow evening. We'll leave you this morning, though, with Brian O'Driscoll previewing tomorrow's decisive third test in the British and Irish Lions.
We've had two very distinct narratives then in the week after the two tests. Obviously, the first one was dominated by the referee, the TMO, the officials, and Razzie Erasmus. This one has been dominated by the analysis of the state of the game almost. I don't remember as big a match been analysed and questions about the future of where rugby is going, if this is what it's all going to be about, and just how turgid it all was. Do you expect a response then on Saturday to that? Do you expect a better game? Do you expect a quicker game? Or do you think, actually, with all that's at stake, we're probably just going to have more of the same again?
Well, rugby's quite reactionary to what's happened most immediately, and you see that in different aspects of rule changes. Where for a period of time, I remember the crooked put in at the scrum. Where it was 2 strikes and there was a yellow card issued, and where is that now? So will it be reactionary towards quickening up the game because of that first half last week? Absolutely. Where the referee will try and use the TMO when he absolutely has to, but will also try and make some decisions for himself with the hope of not missing anything major. So it's a pretty unenviable task that refereeing group has, to be honest with you. You're in for slack one way or another, and they've copped it in a major way. I think they missed a good bit last weekend as well. So even when they're trying to be thorough, they're getting things wrong. So I don't feel as though it's going to be any better a spectacle. I do feel as though it's going to be pretty close, though. I was very negative after the second half last weekend. It just felt as though there was a huge momentum shift from South Africa. Another game under their belt, the way and magnitude and the game plan, the way they put us to the sword. And it just felt as though it was men against boys for 20-25 minutes of that second half. However, I just feel as though because Warren Gatland is coach, because his teams rarely get pumped, rarely get smashed. I just fancy that the Lions will be right in the mix with 10 or 15 minutes to go, and maybe the South Africans feel as though they've now got us cracked. I just feel as though there's a huge amount still to be played for, and that's stating the obvious because it's a deciding game. But rugby's a momentum thing, and it's very hard to shift a momentum, a ball rolling downhill, which it feels like that South African juggernaut was in that second half. But I don't fancy the Lions, but I fancy it to go right to the wire.
And is that based on your knowledge of Warren Gatland and the way he responds to defeats and what he can do in the space of a week? Is it that the South Africans, as some people see, last week was their cup final and they left it all out there emotionally? Or is it looking at that Lions team and the changes he made and feeling a bit more confident that they can play a bit of rugby?
I don't necessarily think it's that. I think they will have to try and score tries. Like, they've scored one try in 2 test matches, and it was from a driving maul. So one thing that I do think they have more scope with this weekend is that Faf de Klerk isn't going to be marshalling the edges. So if anyone that's been watching Faf, what happens off any set piece is he holds wherever that set piece is and plays on the edge. And actually, the Lions tried to target him a couple of times. They tried to go off a line out into midfield, once around the corner, and then kick crossfield across to Maro Toshi who was going to obviously be superior in the air to Faf. It was just a poor execution from Bigger, and it kind of was nullified by that execution. They went another time to Faf with Bigger when they sat him on the blind side. So aerially, they did feel that he was a weakness. But he is a very, very astute defender, understanding when to close the gap, when to play soft, when to get in the eye line of the passer, when to dummy charge and then just come off the gas a little bit and hedge his bets. So I just don't think Cobus Reinach has that same ability. He doesn't have that same fear factor that Faf puts in the opposition. He certainly doesn't have that nasty edge that Faf presents. So I do think from that perspective, there will be more edges to be got, but they just have to be brave and they have to be willing to throw the pass on the line and risk the occasional intercept. That's the reality of it. If you want to break, blitz defenses, occasionally you might be picked off because it's such a fine line between, clear line break and 7 points up the other end. But I do feel as though there are risks that the Lions are going to have to take. We've realised we're not going to win in an arm wrestle. We're not going to win in kick contest. So I think they have to try and find space on the edges. And that's through ball in hand. The kicking game clearly hasn't worked on that front. Unless they manage to kick off third receiver. So if they pull a couple of passes, pull the defence up and then nudge in behind, I think there's scope there. But I do feel as though the passing game is going to be crucial to any success this weekend.
And to be able to achieve that, Brian, how much of it is tactics and the way they set up? How much of it is actually in the mentality of the players and feeling comfortable enough to take those risks?
I think it's more the secondary, the latter. I think it's an attitudinal piece. This is end of the season stuff. The rugby, rugby will finish up for the summer and people will go on holidays and then they'll go back to their clubs. And it's been a long season because of the end of last year's season, the very short break, and then straight back into another season. So, but there's no one feeling sorry for anyone. This is a Lions Test series in the balance, and I just sense that there's definitely one more 80-minute performance, or one big 80-minute performance in this Lions team. I think they definitely had a slightly inflated view of where they were at with all those poor provincial teams that they played against. Got a little bit of a wake-up call against South Africa A. Turned it on in the first test. Got their comeuppance in the second test. So it's all equally balanced to see who can churn out the best performance on tour. And I don't know what it is. There's some little inkling that feels as though the Lions will deliver a much improved performance on last week and will make a proper game of it.
The stat that's been thrown out a lot is around Dan Biggar and playing around an hour and passing the ball 3 times in that. So far, the Lions haven't even been one-dimensional; they've been zero-dimensional so far. How do you go from that in the space of 7 days to suddenly throwing the ball around a bit against the world champions with confidence?
Well, it's not going to be that, right? It's going to be a halfway house. There's still going to be aerial bombardment. There's still going to be a little bit of that. The kick game is still going to be crucial, and winning the breaking ball and contesting in the air, that's a given, because that's test match rugby no matter what. It just seems like there's a huge amount of that in the test match series that we've watched thus far. I'm not saying that they're going to come away from that completely and go all out Fiji on us, but I do feel as though there'll be a happy medium. And Dan Biggar is very capable of playing a passing game as well. If you think about it for Wales, he doesn't play that negative in the pocket, constant kick chase game 100% of the time. Wales like to play. They fancy their chances with ball in hand, running rugby, getting to the edges, backing their skill set. So
why is Warren Gatland asking him to play that game here against a team who are literally the best in the world at it?
I don't know is the honest answer to that. I don't know. I feel, obviously they felt that maybe from a personnel point of view that they didn't have the necessary individuals to have the cutting edge to get to the edges. But I think now that hopefully the pennies dropped that there is something there for them, and that they're going to need tries. And where else are they going to score the tries from? South Africa are watertight in and around the ruck. They give nothing. They're very good in the centre. So I do feel as though Willie Leroux can be got at, questionable on his one-on-one defence. And Mapimpi and Colby, okay defenders, but a lot of it is bluff, is about coming up and hustling the space. Whereas if you can get that slight edge, I do feel as though you could make serious inroads, and that's the thing about a hammer defence or a hard up defence. It's the front that comes with it scares you into doing something you don't want to do. But when you have the bravery to be able to pull the passes and take the chances, the outcome from that can be significant. And scramble defence is much harder. The South African scramble defence is very good and very effective, and the passes lobbed over the top are no good. This has to be clean, sharp, crisp passes to the point, to body, right in front, and quick transfers on, because it's going to be hundredths of a second. There'll be the difference between 2 men around the corner, sometimes 3 men around the corner, such as the aggressiveness of the South African defence up and in, where they're happy to leave numbers over because they feel they can shut the ball down. But the Lions are going to have to find a way somehow through that passing game, and with a combination of still looking to carry aggressively. Bundy and Robbie will be expected to look for advantage line, but they're just going to have to think a little bit bigger than they did so far to break down this South African defence, which I must say has been incredibly impressive.
You mentioned Bundy Aki, and he's one of 4 changes to that back line for the Lions. Matt Williams was on Wednesday Night Rugby last night talking about that all-Irish centre partnership.
Robbie Henshaw is probably one of the only backs who's going to come out of this series for the Lions with his reputation enhanced. He's been absolutely sensational. He's one of the best, if not the best, inside centre in the world. You certainly bracket him up there with Gail Fiku, and let's see how the New Zealanders go on Saturday against the Wallabies. But he's whoever's the best, he's equal. He's been great, and they're playing him at 13. They're playing them at 13 because they didn't select a genuine outside centre in their original squad. How Gary Ringrose didn't make this squad is still mind-boggling. And here we are, one of the best inside centres in the world has to be put at outside centre because they've got no one else. Now, I'm delighted for Bundyaki. He played really well. And to me, on the squad that was selected, that I felt was wrong, that's the best centre combination, but we're only getting it in the third test. Now, that tells you, how do you get around South Africa? You've got to have someone who knows the ropes at 13. You've got to have someone who's experienced, and you've got to have someone with great skills. And they simply didn't select a squad to play that sort of game. And again, it's saying what Rory said. It's not fit for purpose what they've done. Now, is it too late to change it? Well, in the Lions squad, they've proven over the years it's not. But we've got no evidence that they can change. And I actually think they're in a bit of trouble. They're in a fair bit of trouble for Saturday, because even though the Box have lost two key players, and Detroit is just a wonderful back row. I've watched him go through over the last few years, and he's fantastic. And obviously, Faf de Klerk is right up there with the best in the world as well. But the way they're going to play, Reinhardt's a great box kicker. You're not going to lose too much about him. He's a very big physical man. They're probably gaining a little bit of physicality with him. He's a bigger guy than Faf. And if you look at that back five of the Springboks with Esterbeg, De Jager, Montserrat, Colossi and Weiss there, like that's a powerful back five. And their front row have proved they dominated over the other front row, and they've got another game under their belt. So where do the Lions go? And that's an answer that no one sort of can give me on, and I can't come up with you on that selection and say, well, this is where I think the Lions could get a real advantage over South Africa. There's just not a lot of room there.
Yeah, that is Matt Williams speaking on last night's Wednesday Night Rugby. Our Lions coverage is brought to you in association with Vodafone, lead partner of the British and Irish Lions. Brian O'Driscoll is with us. Where's the X factor in that Lions back line, Brian?
I do take Matt's point. I think that they did get the selection wrong at 13. If I was, you could put your Irish hat on and say, Gary Ringrose would be an obvious choice, but if I was Henry Slade, I would be absolutely sick watching this tour. It is made for someone like him. Big physical player with great skills, with a great left foot. Everything that you would have imagined that Warren Gatland was looking for in a 13. Quicker than you think he is, creative, but and very solid in defence. I think that's looking back retrospectively, I think that's a mind-boggling omission.
Well, I think you said it at the time, actually, because I remember you being on the night of the squad announcement, and with the exception of Robbie Henshaw, were quite confused about the centre selections, that almost the three favourites to be selected weren't there, and three guys who were on the fringes end up being selected. I presume most people assumed it was because he had a definite game plan in mind for the type of players that he wanted. It seems from listening to a lot of the analysis that there's a bit of square pegs round holes, that he has players with certain talents, but he's trying to get them to play a system that doesn't suit it.
But I do think that Henry Slade is someone that can play lots of different styles. That's the quality of operator that he is. I've been a huge Gary Ringrose fan for a long time. He's maybe blown a little bit hot and cold recently. The timing of his injury in the missing out in the English game, I think, really cost him a spot and gave Bundy the opportunity to show the best of his game. But listen, these are always going to be marginal calls, and we can only look at them retrospectively as to what has worked and what hasn't, because of the performances or lack of performances from those that have been selected. But it's, if the Lions were looking to play any sort of, expansive game plan, or a game plan to connect, the inside backs with, a pretty exciting back three on paper, well, it does feel as though we haven't had the connector to do that. And I think, Henry Slade or Gary Ringrose would have fit that role. But I do feel particularly that Henry Slade could have played any other role that Warren Gatland wanted as well. And, go back to that left foot again. So much was said about Elliot Daly's left foot in the first test. And it is very important to have a left footer in your ranks, in your back line. I don't know if there's many other better left foots than Henry Slade's too, not just with his wiper kicks, but also those little grubbers in behind. So it just feels as though not much has been said about his omission since the initial squad was selected. And I would love to have seen a combination of him and Robbie Henshaw playing at 12. But I do feel, in the same breath, I do feel that Bundy Aki has absolutely warranted an opportunity to play in this test match. For me, I was asked on the call a while ago, both test match bolters, I thought he might have been one in the first test before the tour started, because right attitude, player that Gats would like, aggressive, very good defender, and a popular guy within the squad. All those things are actually important when it comes to the selection of a guy and how well he's touring. So I'm not shocked to see Bundy in there this week, because the squad needed an energy and an enthusiasm that he's clearly brought the whole tour. But obviously there's extra pep in his step because he's picked in the 12 jersey to start in the third test.
A bit of a fall from grace for Eoin Farrell not to even make the 23. What do you make of his non-inclusion, and also the fact that Finn Russell is there? Is that very much with this is probably going to be tight once again, and with 10 minutes to go we may need that bit of unpredictability, that bit of magic that maybe Finn Russell can provide at the right time?
Well, you never know with your bench what you need them for. You don't know whether you want them to close out a game for you or whether you want them to go and try and pull a rabbit out of a hat for you. And obviously Finn Russell is that second guy more so than the first guy. He's developed into a player that's capable of, doing it all, but he still has a bit of lunatic in him, and I think that's why we all are excited watching him, and that's why Scottish fans, watch through their fingers when he is playing, because he's capable of magical moments, but he's capable of brain farts as well, and so with 15 minutes to go, if the Lions need a score, Finn Russell's your guy to bring on. If they're 3 points up and 10 minutes to go, is Finn Russell the guy to come on and close it out and shut it down? Probably not. But then Conor Murray might be seen to be that guy, so you might see a halfback pairing change. So you pick your bench on the basis of who's going to do something impactful for you, irrespective of your circumstances in the last 15 or 20 minutes. And they just feel as though it hasn't worked with Eoin Farrell thus far. His two ventures off the bench, have not really delivered from his perspective. On the basis of his form this last year, is Eoin Farrell in anywhere near the form of his career? He's not, and he'll be the first to admit it. But it's a big call, leaving a test match animal like him out of a clinching test match, where he's delivered in the past. He'll step up and kick the goals when needed. It can't have been. I know only too well what he feels like when he was given that news that he's not going to be involved in the 23.
Well, it's never worked out for Warren Gatland before, has it, Brian? Are we laughing about that yet? I'm not sure. Are we?
Well, it's written in the stars then for Bundy Aki to come in and score a match-winning try, but it does feel as though whatever happened in 2013 with the platform that those backs were given, it feels as though it's going to be a harder earned platform this time round, because of what happened in the scrum in the second half, because of the impact that their so-called bomb squad produced. And then their driving line out as well, and the damage that did. So it feels as though if you get anywhere near parity, then the Lions have a chance. If you don't, it's going to be a very, very tough battle.
Looking at it with green tinted glasses, there was a real feeling after the second test that Ty Byrne would be right in contention to come into the starting 15. As it's worked out, he hasn't even made the bench for this. Warren Gatland saying maybe Adam Beard, the impact he can make in the final 10 minutes with the rolling maul and how strong he can be defensively. Like, Ty Byrne can look back on his season with a lot of pride, but I'm sure really bittersweet not to be a part of this at all.
Yeah, as he had 10 minutes in the two test matches, or thereabouts. It's hard to it was hard for him to have had any major impact. Obviously, he came on very late in the first test and just trying to see that out. And then in the second test, they're chasing the game. I just always wonder, Gats is a guy that likes big, physically, imposing guys, and that's not really Tadhg Beirne's game. He's a clever player. He reads the game well. He runs clever lines. He's obviously very good over the ball. But I think that Gats always have a little bit of a hang-up around his physicality, and particularly against this opposition. I think that might have been the case, and that is the reason that that Tadhg has been left out, even though he's done nothing wrong. There's plenty of other guys, the 8 non-used players in the squad, particularly the likes of Ian Henderson, who, when Alan Wynne-Jones got injured and dislocated his shoulder in the Japanese game, would have probably been earmarked as a test starter. For him to get no test minutes again must be pretty sickening, because again, he didn't do a whole lot wrong anytime he put the jersey on this tour. But yeah, sometimes a coach just has an eye for you and likes what you do, and obviously he's watching an awful lot more at training as well as just in games. But it does feel as though Ian Henderson just doesn't seem to be Gats' player, and similarly Tadhg Beirne just feels as though the bench, Sam Simmons can offer something that they haven't seen already, and it's hard to argue with that as well.
This would also be an enormous achievement for South Africa if they can win this series, considering how little game time they've had since winning the World Cup. And we Bobby Skinstead on OTB AM yesterday, and he was talking about Rassie Erasmus, and maybe if Rassie Erasmus made 28 points in the video, 27 of them were right. That's certainly the feeling in South Africa, that they've been disrespected for many years. Even this World Cup winning side haven't got the credit that they deserve. When you look at the performance last Saturday and what they could go and do this Saturday, should we be talking more about this team as one of the great international sides?
I think that's difficult to do because of the brand that they play. To the to the rugby purists, maybe they'll be seen as one of the great sides, but I would find it very difficult to go and wax lyrically about this South African team. What I would say is they're an incredibly effective team in the way they play. Their defence is phenomenal. Their appetite for work is very impressive, particularly in the centres. I think that, there's a few players that have gone up in my estimation. In particular, Dialande, definitely went up over the course of the season with Munster. But watching the two of them over the last couple of weeks, I've been incredibly impressed with how much more they offer than what maybe they showed in the World Cup in their success. It does feel as though you look at other World Cup winning teams, they were easier to enjoy and watch because of the brand and style they played. But yet the game is about being effective, and it's a results business. But I don't know if I could agree with the statement that we need to give them more credit as one of the great teams. I can't pay tribute to that. I do feel as though Rassie I think is it a semi-cult going on with what he's said in South Africa, and how they have 100% weighed in behind every one of his words, and I suppose that's sometimes what your team needs.
The siege mentality works.
They need the support of their nation, and whether you think it's right or wrong, but he's managed to convince. Whatever it was, there was a poll taken where it was high 80%. Is Rassie right in what he did in South African news last week? Yeah, when you're talking those numbers, saying he's 100%, he's absolutely right in everything that he said. Well, that's a galvanizing effect for a team that are in a bubble, that are reading social media, that are questioning whether they, are getting a bit of a hard time from rugby decisions or from World Rugby, and they don't have the respect they deserve. Sometimes teams need to play with a chip on their shoulder, and they've created that siege mentality, and it's been effective for them in the second game. Can they do it again in the third game? We'll have to wait and see.
I am loving Rassie as the water boy, though, and his interactions with the players. And look, rugby has been coached a certain way for so long, and we're so used to seeing them suited up in the booth, got all the technology, passing on information. It's not Pep Guardiola on the edge of his technical area and all his players almost looking over to him for approval before they do anything. Do you think if you were a player and you had a coach coming on constantly at every break and play, having a word, is it something that you feel could be beneficial, or actually do you just want to be left to your own devices once the game starts? Or can he make an impact at all in that little space of time that he has?
Yeah, I think there's a calming influence, there's a calming effect that a coach being there would bring. So I can see the benefits of it, absolutely. It depends on the individual. Some players just want to be left alone. They want very small, concise messaging. Some want very little messaging at all because they know the role themselves and know when they've done well or what they need to improve in their own performance, that they don't need it being reinforced by their director of rugby. But obviously, anytime you see the interaction, it seems to have a positive impact. So, the fact that they've managed to manipulate the rules, good luck to them. That's what the game is about as well. It's about trying to squeeze the letter of the law to its final extent, and they've managed to do that. With him not technically being a coach, but clearly the messaging that he's brought on and the calming influence that he has as a water boy has been beneficial to them. And I don't anticipate we'll see him up in the stand this weekend either.
No, call it.
I do feel as though it's going to be tight again, and I think South Africa will get it done by 5 or 6, but I do feel as though it'll be much closer this time round. I thought they'd win, not by the margin they won last week. I thought they might win kind of 6-8, and they ran away with it a bit, and that kind of really put a dent in my positivity. But I just sense that there's something about this Lions team that they're not going to capitulate. They're not going to pack it in, and I do think that they'll be right in the battle with 10 minutes to go. But I just fancy that South Africa might have enough just to push through.
All right, Brian, great stuff as always. Thanks for that.
Cheers, Nathan. Talk to you.
A reminder again that Saturday, 5 o'clock, the British and Irish Lions against South Africa. Full live commentary here on Off the Ball on News Talk. Post-match that evening as well on all our social channels, and we'll be on from 4 o'clock looking ahead to the game as well.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.